as members of the top echelon in the Poison Hall. And this was especially so for Shinju. In order to find the legendary tome of poison legacy that their founder had left behind, they had spent most of their days roaming the world. On their journeys, it was inevitable that they would meet with several powerful master teachers. And there were even some occasions where they had exchanged blows with the grand elders of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. Even so, they had never heard of any master teacher being able to analyze everyone's condition accurately, with just a look and devise strategies on them in just a few seconds. This was not just at the level of being discerning anymore, but being omniscient. It isn't a good timing for us to attack yet, so just focus on defense for the time being. I have a few surges of Jinchi here, and I want you all to discreetly plant them in the area. Make sure that no one notices them. Once you are done, return here and sit down. Zhang Xian instructed as he flicked his finger. The 3 poison masters each received several surges of Jinchi. These surges of Jinchi were rich in spiritual energy, and they harnessed a nourishing aura, contrasting sharply to their destructive, poisonous Jinchi. While Lin Jianghai and the others had no idea why Zhang Xian was issuing such instructions, they still followed his orders and discreetly planted those surges of Jinchi around the area. A poison master's strength lay in planting poison in their victim, without the latter noticing anything at all, let alone that these surges of Jinchi were completely attributeless, making them even less detectable. It did not take them long to finish planting the Jinchi, and they swiftly sat down in front of Zhang Xian. They closed their eyes and started meditating, paying no heed to the menacing glares from the master teachers above. It did not take long for the master teachers in the air to successfully dispel the poison in their bodies, and they quickly turned their sights in Zhang Xian's direction. Upon seeing how defenseless the 4 of them were, frowns appeared on their foreheads. To be honest, they could have made use of their moment of panic to escape earlier, but not only did they choose not to do so, they had even sat down and meditated on the spot. Just what were they up to? Humph, they are just putting on a front. The only reason we suffered a setback earlier is because we were unprepared for their attacks. As long as we proceed carefully, we will surely be able to slaughter them. Elder Chu spat coldly. Indeed, if we can't even subdue 3 poison masters, what right do we have to lead mankind against the otherworldly demonic tribe? Another master teacher growled in agreement. While the Poison Hall had always been considered vermin on the master teacher continent, in truth, the master teacher pavilion headquarters had never considered it as a threat. They felt that as long as they were willing to devote their forces to deal with them, they would be able to destroy them anytime they wanted to. As such, they had charged into the battle expecting to be able to subdue those 3 poison masters with ease, especially given the powerful forces that they had present. Who could have thought that the other party would suddenly make such a bizarre maneuver that ended in all of them getting poisoned instead? In the end, the only powerful threat that they have is poison. I happen to be a 9-star physician specializing in the treatment of poison, so I have quite a few antidotes with me in my storage ring. Allow me to serve as the vanguard and pave a way forward for the rest of you. With a cold bellow, a master teacher stepped forward. He flicked his wrist and popped an antidote into his mouth. Without waiting for Ren Qingyuan's approval, he strode toward Zhang Xian and the others and thrust a powerful palm strike downward upon them. His power was colossal, as if numerous mountains were falling from the sky. But then, it came into contact with one of the surges of Jinchi that the poison masters had planted around the area. This surge of Jinchi swiftly flowed against the master teacher's Jinchi, and in the blink of an eye, it had already dived into the master teacher's body. If it was lethal poison, the protective layer of Jinchi that maintained around him would have automatically filtered and deflected it away. Even if it managed to breach his defenses and slip into his body, the antidote that he had swallowed earlier would also have immediately moved to neutralize it. However, the surge of Jinchi just happened to be pure and attributeless. It successfully bypassed all defensive mechanisms and entered the master teacher's meridians before swiftly making its way toward his vital organs. Voila! The next moment, the master teacher's face abruptly warped in pain, and the might behind his palm strike dissipated entirely. Putong! He plummeted from the sky and curled up from excruciating pain on the ground. This, Elder Chu widened his eyes in shock. He hurriedly rushed up to check the master teacher's condition before uttering in alarm. Elder Bai has been poisoned. He had also encountered this condition back at the Glacier Plain Court. Zhang Xian, disguising as Yang Shi, had managed to poison him using some means that remained a mystery to him even now, stripping him of his strength. Otherwise, he would not have allowed the young man to act as he pleased and destroy the Glacier Plain Court's long heritage. Poisoned, everyone hurriedly turned their sights over, only to see Elder Bai trembling non-stop, seemingly placed in immense pain. The antidote that he had swallowed previously did not seem to be working at all. What kind of poison is that? Ren Qingyuan was stunned. He knew how skilled Elder Bai's medical skills were, and it was not as if he had been unprepared at all. He had even gone to the extent of swallowing an antidote in advance. Yet, he had still ended up being incapacitated by the other party's poison. Just what kind of poison could be that lethal? I have no idea either. The trembling Elder Bai explained through clattering teeth. It's no different from ordinary jinqi, but as soon as it slipped into my body, it swiftly turned into lethal poison, making it impossible to guard against. Ordinary jinqi? Could this be will of poison? This, Ren Qingyuan exclaimed in astonishment. He immediately turned to the other 9-star master teachers and commanded, "Everyone stand back. Don't launch an assault recklessly. Wait till we have found a countermeasure before making any moves." Will of poison referred to the poisons that were harmless usually, making cultivators lower their guard around it. However, it would turn into the most lethal of poisons at the poison master's will, making it a frightening tool of assassination. If the poison masters had planted such a formidable poison in the area, the tables could swiftly turn on them if they charged in recklessly. Thus, they had to find a countermeasure first before making a move. I have come into contact with this poison before. Without a doubt, it's indeed formidable, but it's also very easy to deal with as well. Come, let me help you. With a flick of his finger, Elder Chu sent a surge of jinqi into Elder Bai's body. Having experienced such poison in the Glacier Plain Court, he knew how to resolve. While it did inflict great pain on the ones afflicted with it, it could not hurt one's core. As expected, with his help, the master teacher managed to resolve the poison within just 3 minutes. However, after seeing what had happened to the master teacher, the others did not dare approach Zhang Xian and the others easily. Let's try finding the areas where the poison is planted and uncover what kind of poison it is. We won't make any progress just waiting idly here. Don't worry. As long as this area is sealed, they have nowhere to escape to. Besides, there's a time limit to how long a poison can be exposed to open air before it loses effectiveness. I don't believe that the poison can continue remaining as potent as it is. The crowd discussed their next course of action. No one dared to attack, but no one left the area either. Zhang Shi is actually a master at poison too? Seeing how the young man was able to render the 15 9-star master teachers and a deputy pavilion master helpless, the gazes that Lin Jianghai and the others directed at the young man changed. Unlike before, they were filled with respect and awe. As poison experts, they knew how powerful the will of poison was. What was even more formidable was how the young man was able to infuse his normal jinqi with the will of poison and bring out formidable prowess. They had never seen such an incredible use of poison in their life before. Previously, they had thought that the hall master was only respectful to the young man, due to the gratitude that she had for him in her earlier years, but after witnessing this sight, it seemed like that was not all. In terms of mastery of poison, the young man was definitely above them, possibly on par with, or even exceeding their hall master. It was no wonder the young man was their hall master's teacher. At this point, they had no doubt that their hall master's poison art had truly originated from him. As long as we can buy enough time for the hall master's return, we will be able to turn the tables on them. Seeing how the master teachers dared not approach despite how infuriated they were, Lin Jianghai and the others heaved a sigh of relief. If they could buy sufficient time till the arrival of their hall master, their danger would be resolved. What's going on here? Which one of you is Zhang Xian? In this moment of silence, a voice suddenly sounded in the air. Following which, a figure suddenly appeared in the distance. It was an elder with a white flowy beard. "It's the first elder of the Luo clan," someone amid the crowd exclaimed. Upon seeing that man, Ren Qingyuan's eyes lit up in agitation. "Ha ha ha. Luo Qingchen, you arrived at a timely moment. Do consider joining my Discord to chat about the novel. https://discord.gg/8hvex if you like my work. Do consider dropping a small tip via PayPal. https://donatebot. io/checkout/2777616131285319969. This is bad. In contrast to Ren Qingyuan's excitement, Shen Ju's face turned livid upon seeing the arrival of the elder. What's wrong? Lin Jianghai and the others turned doubtful gazes toward him. Luo Qingchen is the first elder of the Luo clan, and he possesses exceptional aptitude toward the manipulation of space. The poison that Zhang Shi instructed us to plant around the area might be able to fend off most cultivators, but I fear that he will be able to overcome it easily. Shenju explained. What do we do then? Grave expressions surfaced on Lin Jianghai and He Guangyu's faces. In this world, every single existence had its own nemesis. No matter how formidable a poison was, there would definitely be a way to deal with it. While they knew that the poison Jinshi that Zhang Shi had left around the area would not stop the 9-star master teachers for too long, they did not expect them to overcome the problem so swiftly. They had been banking on it lasting till their hall master came back, and everything would have been resolved swiftly. Who could have thought that the first elder of the Luo clan would arrive at this moment? That's how it is. Elder Qingchen, I beseech you to lend us your strength. Ren Qingyuan swiftly explained the matter to Luo Qingchen, before clasping his fist to make a formal request. That isn't a problem at all. Luo Qingchen chuckled softly as he reached out and grasped at the space before him. Sila. The next moment, Zhang Xian felt as if the space around him had been isolated. The Jinshi and lethal poison that they had planted around the area previously seemed to have been severed by some mysterious power and stored in another dimension, causing him to lose control over them. Thank you. Seeing how easily Luo Qingchen resolved the problem they had been plagued with, Ren Qingyuan delightfully relayed his gratitude. With sufficient time, they could have achieved the same as well. However, if they wanted to achieve the same level of precision and accuracy as Luo Qingchen in carrying out the feat, not harming the surroundings in the least, that would have been truly difficult. Let me do it. After all of the surrounding poison had been spatially isolated, Zhang Wuheng chuckled as he raised his hand and dashed forward. When he started saying those words, he was still in the sky, quite some distance away from Zhang Xian and the others. However, by the time he spat out his last word, he was already standing right before Shinju and the others. The instant that he thrust his palm down, it felt almost as if the heavens had been overthrown, completely eradicating the concepts of time and space. There was almost no time lapse in between Luo Qingchen's separation of space and Zhang Wuheng's move, making it nigh impossible for Zhang Xian and the others to respond to the situation. Block him! Shinju bellowed as he flicked poison gas off from his fingertip to engage Zhang Wuheng. Humph! Without bothering to dodge, Zhang Wuheng simply heightened the might of his palm strike. Kacha! The poisonous gas was immediately forced back by the overwhelming might of the palm strike, seeping through Shinju's pores. Pooh! Shinju spat a spurt of blood as black patches appeared all over his face. He quickly took out an antidote and consumed it before feeling a little better. However, by the time all of it was done, it was already too late for him to dodge Zhang Wuheng's palm strike. His chest caved in under the latter's attack, and his entire body was knocked into the ground. Seeing how Right Guardian Shinju, the most powerful man of the group, was swiftly incapacitated under the collaboration of the duo, Ren Qingyuan could not help but nod. It's no wonder the Zhang clan and the Luo clan want to ally with one another. The combination of temporal and spatial powers is indeed fearsome. Individually, the Zhang clan and the Luo clan paled far in comparison to the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters. But if the two of them allied with one another, Even the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters would have to think twice before challenging them. I think there's no need to trouble Elder Wu Heng any further than this. Ren Qingyuan turned to the 9-star master teachers behind him and ordered, "All of you, take those 2 down as well." "Yes." Elder Chu, Elder Bai, and the other elders quickly flew forth. Previously, it had been due to Zhang Xian's arrangements and the sudden onslaught of many unseen lethal poisons that their encirclement had failed tragically. However, with their eye of discernment, they were able to swiftly analyze the mistakes that they had made and the properties of the poisons that they had just faced, thus putting them in a much better position this time around. Peng peng peng. In the blink of an eye, Lin Jianghai and He Guangyu were already exchanging blows with Elder Chu and the others. The difference in the fighting prowess of both sides is simply too big. Zhang Xian thought anxiously. His means could only induce fear in the 9-star master teachers temporarily, making them dare not attack them. However, it was unfortunate that it had been foiled by the first elder of the Luo clan. Even though those 3 poison masters were among the top echelon of the poison hall, ultimately, it was nigh impossible for them to challenge the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, which had dominated the Master Teacher continent for many years. Not to mention the fact that they could only stand their ground in order to protect him, or else they might still have been able to try other maneuvers. Pooh. In less than 10 blows, Lin Jianghai and He Guangyu had already sustained considerable damage. Just like Shenju, they were forced to the ground by a compelling force, completely sealing off their movements. Don't kill them yet. If the head of the poison hall really dares to make a move on our master teachers, we'll use them as chips to negotiate with her, Ren Qingyuan said with a wave of his hand. While the newly inaugurated head of the poison hall might be young, the terrifying reputation of the innate poison body had been passed down from generation to generation. With her unparalleled mastery of poison, if she really made a move on the master teacher pavilions in the vicinity, there was no way that they would be able to stop her. Besides, it was too late for them to rush over to save them. More likely than not, they would be blindly chasing after her tail, thus putting them in an even more disadvantageous position. Rather than that, it would be better for them to capture her subordinates, so that they would have something over her. All right. Elder Chu nodded as he quickly walked over to Shenju's side, to place him under control first. All of a sudden, he felt a dangerous aura assaulting him, and he hurriedly backed away in fright. But before he could get too far away, his face suddenly turned black, and he found himself losing control over the Junqi within his body. Pudong! He was unable to sustain his flight any longer and collapsed to the ground. What happened? Alarmed by the sudden twist, Ren Qingyuan, Zhang Wuheng, and the others immediately tensed up as they assessed their surroundings carefully. A quiet but imposing voice echoed in the air. "I shan't trouble Master Teacher Pavilion to take care of my poison masters." Following which, a young lady dressed in red robes slowly descended from the sky. She was not too old, probably only around 17 to 18, and she had a skinny and not too tall stature. However, there was a pink aura rippling around her, covering a radius of 10 meters or so. Be it plants or Junqi, anything that came within its range would be swiftly corroded into nothing. Ren Qingyuan attempted to extend his spiritual perception toward the young lady in order to assess her closely, but before his spiritual perception could come close to reaching her, it was abruptly severed. In fact, the lethal poison around her even traversed through his spiritual perception toward him, and would have afflicted his primordial spirit, if not for his decisive severing of the connection. What formidable poison! Ren Qingyuan's eyebrows shot up in astonishment. To be able to become the Deputy Pavilion Master of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, his strength could be considered to be the cream of the crop among the elders. He still could not compare up to the distinguished Grand Elders who had been around for a long time, but without a doubt, his strength was ranked amid the top of the Master Teacher continent. Yet despite his strength, he was not even able to peer into the young lady's strength. This was too fearsome. "Are you the newly appointed Hall Master?" Ren Qingyuan asked. To be honest, he was really caught off guard by how powerful the new head of the Poison Hall was. He was not certain if he could defeat her even if he used his full strength. On the other hand, the red-robed young lady continued descending silently from the sky, paying no heed to Ren Qingyuan's question at all. Seeing how disrespectful the other party was, one of the 9-star master teachers furiously howled, "You lass! Are you deaf or mute? Can't you hear our deputy pavilion master is talking to you?" Hearing those words, the young lady shot a cold glance over to the 9-star master teacher, before flicking her hand lightly, as if swatting a fly. Ah! The next instant, the complexion of the 9-star master teacher turned pitch black, and he clasped his neck tightly, as if he could not breathe at all. Following which, he fell from the sky to the ground as well, just like what had happened to Elder Chu earlier. Ren Qingyuan quickly rushed over to the 9-star master teacher, and fed him an antidote, and only then did the latter's condition improve slightly. However, terrified by the previous experience, the 9-star master teacher no longer spouted any nonsense anymore. To be able to poison him with just a casual swat of her hand. Just what kind of ability was that? He was not the only one in such a state. The other 9-star master teachers also tensed up as they gazed at the young lady in front of them warily with ugly complexions. For an individual to induce such fear in 16 9-star master teachers, and the leaders of 3 major powers, no one would dare believe such a thing to be possible. This was the innate poison body, one of the strongest unique constitutions in the world, an existence deeply feared by even Kong Shi back then, who, before everyone's fearful gazes, the red-robed young lady landed on the ground, and she swiftly kneeled with both of her knees. "Teacher, please pardon Wei Ruyan for arriving late." Instead, they could see agitation and longing in her eyes, similar to that of a reunion with close kin. As they came to realize what was going on, the trio thought, "It seems like Zhang Shi isn't just our hall master's teacher. He's her benefactor as well. We must relay these words to the others when we return. Cross the hall master rather than cross Zhang Shi. If they offended the hall master, perhaps they might still be able to defuse the situation by apologizing. However, if they offend Zhang Shi and the hall master learned of it, it was very likely that the hall master would kill them without bothering to listen to their explanation. The head of the poison hall is Zhang Xian's student? So, the reason she spared Gong Shi back then was out of consideration for him? The fact that a student that he raised was able to become the head of the poison hall means that he is a formidable poison master as well. It's no wonder he was able to wreak havoc in the Zhang clan, Sanctum of Sages, and the Glacier Plain Court despite his low cultivation realm. The way of poison is unorthodox and depraved. Those who practice it can't possibly be of honorable character. With deadly poison in their possession, the master-teacher continent will remain threatened as long as they live. We have to deal with them promptly. Otherwise, if they ever decide to use their strength for evil, it would end in a bloodbath for the master-teacher continent. Watching the sight in front of them, an uproar broke out amid the 9-star master teachers. The head of the poison hall had made a domineering entrance, and her every movement and gesture further created her image of invincibility. Yet, as soon as she arrived before Zhang Shi, she immediately kneeled down and allowed the latter to fondle her head as he pleased, as if she was just a little girl before him. While they were shocked by the matter, it had also made them further their resolve. Without a doubt, Zhang Xian would be an even more frightening force if he matured. If they could not control him now, the world would be a mess in the future. We must try to pull them over to our side, and if that doesn't work out, we'll have no choice but to destroy them. Ren Qingyuan told the 9-star master teachers telepathically with a grim look on his face. Prodigies were indeed the greatest treasure of mankind, but only obedient prodigies were useful prodigies. Those who refused to bow down to command and simply did as they pleased would eventually culminate into a calamity. Over the past tens of thousands of years, countless geniuses had risen in the master-teacher continent, and there was no lack of cases where they had turned into demons due to the occurrence of an event in some point of their life. As such, the master-teacher pavilion had come to take only 2 stances when it came to them. The geniuses could either choose to submit to the master-teacher pavilion's authority and come under its command or choose death. To protect mankind from the threats surrounding it for many years, The Master-Teacher Pavilion could not afford to be all good and virtuous. Ideals and morals were only for the privileged. When the fate of mankind was on the line, they would have no choice but to compromise their morals for the sake of the greater good. Elder Chu and the others nodded in agreement to what Ren Qingyuan said. After issuing his instructions, Ren Qingyuan glanced at the teacher-student pair beneath and began speaking in an amiable voice. Zhang Xian, the fact that you have chosen the path as a master teacher means that you feel a belonging to the Master-Teacher Pavilion. As long as you surrender and face the consequences of your actions, I'll ensure your safety. Perhaps, you might still have an opportunity to become a master teacher once more in the future. However, if you continue struggling, not only will you be cornering yourself, even your student could very well lose her life because of you. The poison hall and the innate poison body are admittedly powerful, but you should know that the Master-Teacher Pavilion didn't remain as the top power of the Master-Teacher continent with just those petty means that we have shown you. Pavilion Master Ren. Hearing that Ren Qingyuan was going to ensure his safety, Zhang Wuheng and Yu Ruoxin immediately turned their heads over anxiously. But before they could say anything else, Ren Qingyuan had already interjected. I know what you want to say, but the Master-Teacher Pavilion has its own considerations in making this judgment. As long as he agrees to our conditions, I'll give you all a satisfactory answer. All right then, we'll put our trust in you. Since Ren Qingyuan had already said so much, even though the two of them were still a little indignant at letting Zhang Xian off the hook so easily, they still reluctantly nodded in agreement. How about it? I'll give you 10 minutes to consider the matter, Ren Qingyuan said. Face the consequences of my actions? Zhang Xian directed a deep gaze at Ren Qingyuan as he repeated the words that the latter had said earlier. What kind of consequences will there be for my actions? While you did cause a huge uproar, given that no lives were lost, I believe that there's still some ground for reconciliation. Since I have already made this guarantee on your behalf, the other powers also won't go too overboard with their demands, Ren Qingyuan replied. I trust your words, Pavilion Master Ren. But what I am curious about is how the Master-Teacher Pavilion intends to deal with me, Zhang Xian replied. If the Master-Teacher Pavilion guaranteed his safety, the Zhang clan, Glacier Plain Court, and the Sanctum of Sages certainly would not dare to go too far against him. No good would come from snubbing the most powerful organization in the world, after all, and they still had their future to consider. It felt like as long as Ren Qingyuan willed it, he could destroy the souls of any of them present in an instant. This was the tremendous power harnessed within the Pavilion Master Seal. Other than the Great Codex of Spring and Autumn, the Pavilion Master Seal could be said to be the #1 treasure of the Master-Teacher Pavilion. While the Deputy Pavilion Masters could only wield a tenth of its true prowess, it was more than enough to solidify the Master-Teacher Pavilions standing on the continent, making all of the major powers deferential to its authority, granting the Deputy Pavilion Master might that was unmatched beneath ancient sage. Even experts of Yangshi's caliber would not dare clash head-on with him. Your student might be powerful, but with the Pavilion Master Seal in hand, I will be able to crush her soul directly, and not even her innate poison body will be able to stop me, Ren Qingyuan said as he allowed the Pavilion Master Seal to float freely in front of him. The carrot and the stick. Since he had already shown them a possible way out of the dilemma that they were in, he should also let them know that the prowess of the Master-Teacher Pavilion did not just stop at words, so that they knew the decision that they had to make. Wei Ruyan glanced at the seal before turning to her teacher. However, before she could speak, Zhang Xian had already shaken his head and interjected. You won't be a match against it. The Pavilion Master Seal floating in front of Ren Qingyuan was many times stronger than his Sanctum Head token. If Ren Qingyuan really tapped into its power, they would indeed stand no chance at all. Since that's the case, may I ask how imprinting my soul on it will affect me? Zhang Xian asked. Don't worry, the effects will only be beneficial to you. Firstly, it ensures that you'll never be able to turn your back on the Master-Teacher Pavilion, so no one will be able to doubt your loyalty to mankind. Secondly, if you are in any danger, you'll be able to communicate with the Master-Teacher Pavilion through your soul imprint on the pavilion master seal, and will be able to bring reinforcements to you in the fastest time possible. Ren Qingyuan replied, "It ensures that I'll never be able to turn my back on the master-teacher pavilion? In other words, I will be signing a soul contract and putting my soul under your control, won't I?" Zhang Xian asked. Based on what he had heard, it was similar to the contract between a beast tamer and their tamed beast. If he imprinted his soul on it, that would be as good as placing his life in the hands of the master-teacher pavilion. The only reason I am asking you to imprint your soul on it is just to avoid the possibility of you ever committing treacherous acts against mankind. You can rest assured that I won't force you to do anything at all. They were all dressed in master-teacher robes, and one thing that the crowd immediately noticed was that their faces were all pitch black. Despite having lost consciousness, they were still writhing on the ground in agony. It would not take a genius to figure out that they had all been poisoned. "They are our master teachers? She actually poisoned so many of our master teachers." Shocked gasps echoed from here and there. Ren Qingyuan's complexion also turned extremely ugly. He recognized some of those master teachers lying on the ground. They were the top experts of the master teacher pavilions, within a 60,000 li radius of the Glacier Plain Court, and many of them were 8-star master teachers. In their respective master teacher pavilions, they were powerful figures who could determine the fates of countless people with just their words. But against the head of the Poison Hall, they stood no chance at all. It was inevitable that they would be captured by her. "What do you want?" Ren Qingyuan spat coldly with narrowed eyes. "Nothing in particular. If you wish to make a move on me and my teacher, be my guest. However, I can promise you that if we die here today, the poison masters of the Poison Hall will immediately leap into action, and at least half of all master teachers across the master teacher continent will lose their lives in the time to come." Wei Ruyan replied haughtily as she placed her hands behind her back in emulation of her teacher's usual posture. A few months ago, she had still been a young lady reliant on her teacher, but at this very moment, she was already a true leader who could stand her ground on the master-teacher continent. Even the master-teacher pavilion headquarters no longer wielded the power to kill her at will. Outrageous! This is completely outrageous. How dare you threaten us? It seems like the master-teacher pavilion has really erred by not destroying you miscreants sooner. Upon hearing those words, the 9-star master teacher in the air trembled from sheer rage. As the #1 occupation on the master teacher continent, they were used to being treated with the utmost respect and honor. No one had ever spoken to them like that. Glaring coldly at Wei Ruyan, Ren Qingyuan said, "Every single one of our master teachers has already resolved themselves to lay down their life for mankind when they became a master teacher. It's futile to threaten me with their lives. Your poison masters are indeed a difficult bunch to deal with, but know that your poisons aren't omnipotent. As long as we devote our effort to it, the master teacher pavilion will be able to find a way to nullify all of the poisons that you have." Back then, the treacherous soul oracles were a powerful force as well, but the master-teacher pavilion still managed to destroy them at their very roots. It's only in view of the fact that the poison master's unique insight into medicinal herbs could aid the advancement of mankind that we have tolerated you all so far. I advise you not to end the Poison Hall's long legacy due to your own selfishness. Seeing how Ren Qingyuan was devoid of fear, Wei Ruyan burst into laughter. "You said that your master teachers are willing to lay down their lives for mankind? Wonderful. I have always wanted to see how deep their resolve is. Let's see which of us is the first to cave in then." With a wave of her hands, the poisonous air that shrouded her immediately diffused into the surroundings. The closest 9-star master teacher to her failed to escape in time, and his face immediately turned pitch black as he collapsed to the ground and vomited nonstop. Seeing how fearsome the poisonous air was, Zhang Wuheng, Yu Ruoxin, and the others hurriedly fled in fear. The prowess of the innate poison body was really as fearsome as its reputation made it out to be. "Since you are courting death, I'll fulfill your wish," Ren Qingyuan uttered coldly. The poisonous air that Wei Ruyan was diffusing could very well reduce the entire Empire Alliance into a state of living hell. Unable to watch such atrocities being committed right before his eyes, Ren Qingyuan reached out and tapped the pavilion master seal ahead of him. Wang! The pavilion master seal buzzed softly in response, and following which, a dizzyingly immense force burst forth from it, intending to obliterate Wei Ruyan's primordial spirit straight. Hong long long. Wei Ruyan's eyebrows shot up as she quickly gathered all of her jinqi to defend against that attack. Hong long. Just as Wei Ruyan was about to reach her limits, a wintry voice echoed in the air. You speak of soul oracles in contempt, and yet, you use the very soul arts that you frown upon to deal with my teacher and my junior. Just how far can the hypocrisy of the master-teacher pavilion go? A massive soul abruptly appeared right in the sky, looming over the crowd. With a slight wave of his finger, the pavilion master seal flew right into the hands of the soul. The seal struggled intensely to escape, but it was unable to break free from the grasp of the massive soul. That is a soul oracle? Wasn't the entire lineage of the soul oracles destroyed many millenniums ago? How could there still be one around? The soul oracle said something about dealing with his teacher and junior earlier. Could it be that he's Zhang Xian's student as well? Not only did Zhang Xian teach a poison master, he even groomed a soul oracle? Everyone's face distorted in shock. Even the 9-star master teachers, who could remain calm before the worst of turmoil, looked as if they had seen a ghost. It was one thing for him to have taught a hall master, who possessed the innate poison body. But for such a massive soul oracle to claim to be his student too? Was this for real? Even though the heritage of the soul oracles had already vanished many millenniums ago, the person was still able to steal the pavilion master seal from Ren Qingyuan in a single move, rendering him helpless. Without a doubt, it was apparent that he was an expert too, for the students that he had taught to actually be stronger than him. And more importantly, there were actually 2 of them. Let go of the pavilion master seal. Ren Qingyuan roared furiously as he rushed upward to snatch the pavilion master seal back. He had been so focused on Wei Ruyan that he let his guard down for a moment and allowed a soul oracle to approach him and snatch the pavilion master seal. The pavilion master seal represented the very dignity and standing of the master-teacher pavilion. He could not allow anything to happen to it. Sila. Ren Qingyuan moved so quickly that the surrounding space actually distorted under his movement. As the deputy pavilion master, Ren Qingyuan's strength was significantly above that of Zhang Wuheng and Yu Ruoxin. With him exerting his full strength, the crowd felt as if someone had robbed the surrounding sound and light, leaving them with nothing but despairing darkness. It was almost as if the world had been torn into 2, and they had fallen into a crevice of nothingness. Of course, it was all just a misperception of the senses. Nevertheless, this move was already powerful enough to send one's primordial spirit into a disorientated state, making it nigh impossible for one to set reality apart from illusion anymore. Powerful, I'll admit. However, you are too naive if you think that you can catch me like that. The soul oracle in the sky chuckled as his silhouette swiftly turned ethereal before phasing out altogether, as if he had never been there in the first place. It's the long-lost art of soul traverse. Luo Qingchen narrowed his eyes in shock. Soul traverse? The confused Zhang Wuheng asked. In the first place, souls are formless and intangible. As long as one's will is strong enough, it's possible for a soul to break the restrictions of space and traverse freely through space, bypassing all restrictions that stand in its path. Of course, due to the limitations of one's strength, it's impossible for a soul to conduct long-distance teleportation similar to that of teleportation formations. But still, the ability to pull off short-distance teleportation can bring one a massive advantage in battles. Luo Qingchen explained. Due to the Luo clan bloodline flowing through his veins, he had a higher grasp over the spatial laws compared to the other cultivators gathered in the area. So he was able to see through Lu Chong's maneuver swiftly. Teleportation was extremely taxing on one's body, as one had to bear the brunt of the spatial storm while moving from one place to another. But due to the intangible and formless nature of souls, the effects of the spatial storm were significantly reduced for soul oracles, thus making it more feasible for them to traverse through space. Ren Qingyuan was indeed very powerful, But against an opponent capable of spatial traverse, it would not be easy for him to catch the other party. Who? Right after those words were spoken, the disappeared soul oracle suddenly phased back into existence, right in front of a 9-star master teacher. Boom! As soon as he appeared, he immediately channeled a powerful burst of energy, right toward the chest of the 9-star master teacher. Pung! Before the 9-star master teacher could even react, he was struck squarely in the chest and knocked flying, destroying countless buildings in his path. It was fortunate that Ren Qingyuan had been concerned that a huge commotion would break out while apprehending Zhang Xian, so he had ordered the local master teacher pavilion to evacuate ordinary citizens away from this area. Otherwise, who knew how many innocent lives would have been lost from that single attack? You redirected my attack? Ren Qingyuan hurriedly withdrew his attack as he glared at the soul oracle in front of him with fiery eyes. With his eye of discernment, he could tell that the other party had swept away a portion of the might of his attack, using his spatial traverse, which was how the other party had managed to severely wound his companion in a single strike. Not too bad. Come, let's continue. I see that there are still many 9-star master teachers around, so I'll be counting on your help to knock all of them out. The soul oracle said with a chuckle. You. Ren Qingyuan clenched his fists tightly together as he tried to suppress his rage. The fact that the soul oracle was able to traverse through space swiftly meant that his attack would not be of much use. Not only so, if the other party redirected it toward his companions, would he not actually be harming his own comrades instead? In order to achieve soul traverse, one has to be a 9-star soul oracle at the very least. But wasn't the heritage of the soul oracles completely destroyed by the master teacher pavilion? Who in the world are you? Where did you come from? Ren Qingyuan roared furiously. Strength of the other party's level could not be molded in just a day or two. If there was still a settlement of soul oracles existent in the world, there was no way that the master teacher pavilion could have remained oblivious to it for so long. The Master Teacher Pavilion did utterly destroy the Soul Oracle Guild back then, but they didn't manage to wipe away all traces of their heritage. Alright, hurry up and make up your mind, whether you want to continue attacking me or not. Otherwise, I don't really want to be wasting time on an old fart like you. The Soul Oracle mocked in a contemptuous tone. Hand the Pavilion Master Seal over, or else the Master Teacher Pavilion won't mind destroying the Soul Oracle Guild a second time. Ren Qingyuan bellowed as he dashed toward the Soul Oracle furiously once more. Sila. The space around the Soul Oracle suddenly solidified, as if someone had encased it in ice, preventing him from making any movement. Battle technique Frozen Space. This was a technique that could seal all disturbances in space, thus rendering even teleportation formations completely ineffective. The reason he had wasted so many words on the Soul Oracle earlier was to gather sufficient energy in order to cast this technique. Let's see where else you can escape to this time around. After sealing the Soul Oracle in place, Ren Qingyuan flicked his wrist and whipped out a sword. Without any hesitation, he brandished the sword right toward the Soul Oracle ahead of him. This sword carried an intense killing intent, such that even before the blade had arrived before its target, the killing intent was already stifling its target. Such an attack could easily inflict grievous wounds, even to a Soul Oracle. In face of the powerful sword strike, the Soul Oracle knew that he would not be able to escape, but he did not panic. Instead, with a mysterious smile, he swiftly compressed his massive body into the size of the Pavilion Master Seal, before hiding right beneath it. Wang. Ren Qingyuan did not expect the Soul Oracle to compress himself at this point in time. At this rate, his sword strike would definitely land on the Pavilion Master Seal. Thus, he hurriedly redirected his attack and pulled back his sword. As the redirection of his might happened too quickly, it resulted in a reflux in his jinqi, causing an aching pain to strike his chest. Following which, fresh blood spewed out of his lips. The Soul Oracle knew that Ren Qingyuan would try to grab the Pavilion Master Seal right after. So as soon as the latter's sword flew past the Pavilion Master Seal, he immediately reverted to his original size, grabbed the Pavilion Master Seal, and retreated before Ren Qingyuan could do anything else. Ha ha ha, the Soul Oracle chuckled triumphantly. Feel free to make your move, But as long as the Pavilion Master Seal remains with me, you won't be able to kill me. You. Ren Qingyuan narrowed his eyes in fury as his chest puffed up and down from rage. His face was so red that it reminded one of a volcano on the verge of eruption. First, the Poison Masters who had not dared to leave their headquarters for at least 10 millenniums, and now, an occupation that should have already vanished in the annals of history. Nothing was really going his way that day, and words could not begin to describe how frustrated he was feeling. Had someone told him that this would happen in the past, he never would have believed it. Taking a deep breath, Ren Qingyuan suppressed his rage, and said with forced composure, "The Pavilion Master Seal contains the will of generations of Deputy Pavilion Masters. You might have used your soul energy to snatch it away, and sever my connection with it, but you will never be able to truly control it. In fact, you have to constantly guard against it, fearing a rebound from it. I know that despite your leisurely appearance, the Pavilion Master Seal is searing your soul, as if you are grasping onto lava itself." The Pavilion Master Seal was the symbol of authority for the Master Teacher Pavilion. If anyone could snatch it away that easily, what would that say about the Master Teacher Pavilion? While the Soul Oracle might seem as if he was holding it with ease, in truth, he was under constant attack from the wills of preceding Deputy Pavilion Masters, placing great strain on his soul. "Well, I'll admit that your thing is indeed hard for me to handle," the Soul Oracle chuckled. "However, it isn't time for me to return it to you yet." After saying those words, he turned his sights away from Ren Qingyuan and headed down toward the young man and the young lady, standing in the midst of the rubble below. He kneeled onto the ground and said, "Teacher, Lu Chong has returned." Good. Zhang Xian watched as the Soul Oracle before him reverting to the size of an ordinary human, and the appearance of the slightly reclusive young man came clearly into his sight. He could not help but nod in gladness. The Soul Oracle before him was none other than the student of his that had headed to the ancient domain of the Soul Oracles previously, Lu Chong. When he had first taken the young man in as his student, the latter had been quiet and reticent. In fact, he had gone on not speaking a single word for years, fearing that his enemies would find him. Yet, he had become a man who dared mock even the Deputy Pavilion Master of the Master Teacher Pavilion. That was a sign that he had finally walked out from the trauma resulting from the massacre of his clan. To be honest, Zhang Xian was not bothered about the talents or even the strength of his students. With him around, no matter how strong his students currently were, he was confident that he could groom them into powerhouses of the world. As such, what he was the most concerned about was their character. A person's character would ultimately determine their path and their fate. Only a person driven to surpass themselves would be able to reach the peak, and even beyond. To Zhang Xian, that was really the only criterion that he felt one needed to become an expert. On the other hand, a person who was unmotivated and indolent, spending precious time thinking only of how they could brag to others instead cultivating. Such a person would never become an expert even with the best teacher and best resources. The person whom he was speaking about was, of course, Sun Chong. Sun Chong had followed him for the longest period of time and used the largest bulk of his resources. Yet in the end, he was still the weakest of them all. Hearing his teacher's compliment, Lu Chong's eyes lit up in agitation as he clasped his fist. "Teacher, I have successfully awakened the combat soul constitution." "I've seen," Zhang Xian replied with a smile. Back then, in order to save him, Lu Chong had charged into harm's way and ended up being severely wounded by the crown prince of the Xianyuan kingdom, thus ending in a deep sleep. It was after going through much trouble to wake him from his coma that he had found that Lu Chong's soul was incomparably large. Once it was awakened, there was no doubt that it would surely grant him tremendous strength. Given how the current Lu Chong was able to fool around with even Ren Qingyuan, it was apparent that he had already successfully awakened his combat soul constitution and gained full control over it. There was no other way that he could have advanced his cultivation so much within the span of a single year. Seeing his teacher's smile, Lu Chong suddenly felt fulfilled within, as if the hard work that he had put in over the past year had finally come to fruition. Nodding, He quickly passed over the pavilion master seal that he had taken from Ren Qingyuan. Teacher, I'll leave this with you for now. If that old fogey gets it back, we won't stand a chance against him anymore. Understanding the logic behind that, Zhang Xian reached out to take the pavilion master seal from him. The reason Lu Chong had been able to snatch the pavilion master seal from Ren Qingyuan was not because he was stronger than him. Rather, when soul oracles intentionally hid their presence, it would be difficult for any cultivator to find them. On top of that, Ren Qingyuan's attention had been completely focused on Wei Rian then. It was due to these two factors that Lu Chong had managed to catch Ren Qingyuan off guard and seize his pavilion master seal. Had Ren Qingyuan been guarded against him from the very start, even if Lu Chong had been 2 times stronger than he currently was, he still would have been unable to seize the seal from Ren Qingyuan's grasp. As soon as Zhang Xian came into contact with the pavilion master seal, he immediately felt a feeling of intimacy to it. It was almost as if the seal was made just for him, and he could tame it for his own use at any moment. Zhang Xian was taken aback. What's going on? He was certain that this was his first time coming into contact with the pavilion master seal, and he had thought that it would be difficult for him to control an artifact so much stronger than him. Yet, when he held it in his hand, it felt almost as if it was an artifact that he had personally forged. It was filled with fondness and affection for him. Should I try assimilating it? Zhang Xian wondered as he placed his hand over it, wanting to try to fuse his blood into it. However, just as he was about to do so, he suddenly felt a heavy pressure weighing down from above. Raising his head, he found all of the 9-star master teachers gathering together as one, collaborating with one another to form a formation that manifested in the form of a massive light barrier in the air. Teacher, that's the city defense formation of the Empire Alliance. It's built with the Empire Alliance Master Teacher Pavilion at its very center, and it was constructed to defend against enemies that threaten the security of the Empire Alliance. It seems like the 9-star Master Teachers have activated it. Wei Rian said grimly. After learning that her teacher was an Empire Alliance, she had swiftly gathered all of the intelligence available on the Empire Alliance, so as to heighten the chances of success for the rescue operation. City Defense Formation? The formation isn't really too powerful by itself, but with so many 9-star master teachers augmenting it with their Zhenqi, it has formed a powerful force that we can't afford to underestimate, Wei Rian explained. For many years, the Master Teacher Pavilion had succeeded in keeping the otherworldly demonic tribe off the Master Teacher continent. The strength of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters did play a part to that end, but more than that, the Master Teacher Pavilion had also set up many branches across the continent, and each of those branches had constructed massive formations in the cities that they resided in. Those massive formations had lain dormant for many years, nourished by the spiritual energy in the surroundings, such that when an invasion finally happened, they would be able to call forth devastating might once they were activated. Such was the case at that moment. In the first place, the Empire Alliance was not a weak power, so its city defense formation was of considerable power. With so many 9-star master teachers working together to augment it, once it was activated, it formed a formidable force that even Yang Shi would have found hard to deal with. Teacher, rest assured, with my soul traverse and Junior's poison art, no matter how strong their formation may be, they won't be able to keep us in here easily. Lu Chong replied with a confident smile. The journey to the ancient domain of the soul oracles had made him mature considerably as well. He was no longer the helpless young man that he had once been. Just like Wei Rian, he had also become a powerhouse on the Master Teacher continent, and his every word and gesture carried an imposing air to it that commanded respect of others, making others dare not cross him. Indeed, their formation might be powerful such that it would be impossible for me to face it straight on. But if it's just escaping, that won't pose a problem for me at all. Wei Rian replied as the poison aura around her billowed, seemingly ready to sweep into the surroundings and corrode everything in its path. Seeing how confident his students were, Zhang Xian replied with a smile. I have never been worried about escaping. While my cultivation might not be too high at the moment, if I really intend to escape, There's no way they would be able to keep me here. His cultivation might have been far beneath his students, but formations, to him, were really not much different from a free gift from the enemies. Ever since he walked out from the Tianxian kingdom, he had never seen a formation that could truly trap him before. Then, perplexed looks surfaced on Wei Rian and Lu Chang's faces. Since their teacher was able to escape from the encirclement by himself, why was he still idling around the area? While they were able to hold their ground for the time being, the situation was really not in their favor. I can't afford to leave right now. Your senior Zhaoye is at a crucial period in her cultivation, and if we leave now, it'll be one thing for her efforts to be rendered futile, but she might even lose her life as a result of that, Zhang Xian explained. Senior Zhaoye? Cultivating? Where? Hearing that their senior was here as well, the two of them were taken aback. Since it was the Pavilion Master Seal, it should have some kind of ability that allowed it to rally or command the master teachers. If he could tame it, he might just be able to find a way out of their difficult situation without causing bloodshed. Grasping the token tightly, Zhang Xian willed flaws. Who? A book materialized in his head. The Pavilion Master Seal of the Master Teacher Pavilion, an artifact forged by an ancient sage. It's created by fusing 3 droplets of Kong Shi's divine blood, and it wields formidable offensive prowess against souls. Flaws undetectable. Zhang Xian froze on the spot. Undetectable? How could this be? On his journey, he had seen a diverse range of weapons. Regardless of whether the weapon had been forged by a formidable master or a rookie blacksmith, he would be able to find the flaws in it easily. There were no secrets that they could hide from the Library of Heaven's Path. Yet, the book compiled on the Pavilion Master Seal actually reflected the flaws as undetectable. What was going on? A thought surfaced in Zhang Xian's mind. Could Kong Shi be of the discarnate constitution of divination as well? The seers found those with the discarnate constitution of divination unreadable, and even the Library of Heaven's Path would have difficulties trying to peer into it. Both he and Luo Ruoxin possessed the discarnate constitution of divination, and that would explain why the Library of Heaven's Path did not work on either of them. Considering that the Pavilion Master Seal was made from 3 droplets of Kong Shi's blood essence, perhaps the reason that the Library of Heaven's Path was unable to find a flaw in the token was because of his discarnate constitution of divination affecting the results. Zhang Xian pondered for a while before nodding. That should be the case. Considering how even the young prodigy of the Zhang clan possessed such a constitution, surely it should not come as a shock that a man as great as Kong Shi would possess such a constitution as well. That was also probably how he had managed to dominate the land, overcoming the countless traps that the otherworldly demons had laid for him, and eventually ushering in an era of prosperity for mankind. But if I don't know the flaws in the seal, how am I to tame it? Zhang Xian frowned. In the past, whenever he tamed a weapon, he would first find a flaw in it before exploiting the flaw in order to tame it. Otherwise, going by normal means, even ordinary saint artifacts would require a year or 2 before pledging their servitude. Clearly, he did not have that much time to waste. Let me try my blood. Zhang Xian tapped his finger, and a droplet of blood dripped from the fingertip onto the seal. Halala! As if a smooth lotus leaf, his droplet of blood simply flowed around on the surface of the seal, showing no signs of being taken in. After flowing for a while, the seal fell onto the floor. Zhang Xian's eyebrows leaped up. Ordinary artifacts would swiftly absorb any blood that they came into contact with, thus taking in the will that was infused into the blood as well. However, for some inexplicable reason, the Pavilion Master Seal was not taking in his blood at all. This was the first time that Zhang Xian had seen such an artifact. It expresses intimacy toward me, but it refuses to take in my blood. How in the world am I supposed to tame this artifact? He had thought that given the surprising intimacy between him and the Pavilion Master token, he should be able to tame it with ease. Yet, who could have known that it would turn out to be even more troublesome than any artifact he had seen before? Hung Long. While Zhang Xian was still distressed by the lack of response from the seal, he suddenly heard a resounding explosion, and raising his head, he saw that the city defense formation had already fully formed. Ren Qingyuan and the others stood loftily in the air above, and they gazed down on them with such coldness in their eyes that it almost seemed like they were helpless goats waiting to be slaughtered. Forget it, there's no time to tame it anymore. I'll just have to look into it later, Zhang Xian thought as he placed the pavilion master seal into his storage ring. In response to his act of putting it away, the pavilion master seal obediently entered his storage ring, not resisting at all. This reminded Zhang Xian of an occurrence in his previous world. An ordinary-looking fellow fell in love with a diva, and he could ask her out and chat with her. However, whenever he wanted to further their relationship, he would be heartlessly pushed back. In the end, what he thought was love was actually just a backup plan for the diva. Such was the case with the pavilion master seal. It was very obedient to his touch, and it did not resist even when he tried to stow it into his storage ring. However, when he tried to tame it, it simply refused to respond at all. Zhang Xian, if you still have the slightest nostalgia for your identity as a master teacher, I ask you to hand the pavilion master seal over. Otherwise, I shall make sure that the poison hall and the soul oracles become a thing of the past today. Ren Qingyuan bellowed coldly. Previously, he had still been considering the possibility of capturing Zhang Xian alive and forcefully putting him under control. However, the fact that the other party dared to snatch his pavilion master seal and even stow it into his storage ring, there was no longer any room for reconciliation. To have the pavilion master seal snatched away in public was a huge disgrace to the master-teacher pavilion, and to make the situation worse, his two students were influential figures. One of them controlled the poison hall, while the other one had inherited the heritage of the soul oracles. If he did not exact swift punishment upon them, things could really blow up. For one, the enemies of the master-teacher pavilion could seek to ally themselves with the poison hall after hearing that they had succeeded in snatching the pavilion master seal, thus bolstering their might. At the same time, the failure of the master-teacher pavilion in protecting their insignia of authority could result in their allies losing confidence in them, and that had to be avoided at all costs given the impending crisis looming ahead of them. Make us a thing of the past. Try it then. Let's see how many people you are willing to offer as tributes for our deaths. Wei Ruyan harumphed coldly. She flicked her wrist once more, and the poisonous aura around her swiftly diffused around the area to form something reminiscent of a barrier around her and the others. Regardless of whether it was weapons or jinshi, anything that came into contact with the light barrier would be afflicted by the poisonous aura. Not even 9-star master teachers would be spared from that. Fools! Ren Qingyuan sneered coldly as he raised the sword in his hand. Master teachers, activate the Kuei-Xing formation. Hula! The 9-star master teachers swiftly got to action, and in the blink of an eye, an unimaginable amount of energy was channeled from the surrounding buildings and the formation into the tip of his sword, imbuing it with the air of a conqueror. Break! The energy focused on the tip of the sword shot forth as a golden ray of light, tearing a massive rift in space as it crushed downward. When it came into contact with the barrier of poisonous aura, it visibly paused for a brief moment, but the next instant, it pierced right through it as if tearing a sheet of paper in two. Humph! With a furious bellow, Lu Chong expanded his soul to several dozen meters large once more, and he swiftly traversed through space consecutively, using his soul energy as a thread to forcefully stitch up the spatial rift, so as to forcefully stop the ray of light. Using your soul energy to stitch the spatial rift? As expected of a soul oracle, you do have some unique means. However, I would like to see how long you can last. Ren Qingyuan jeered as he pushed the sword in his hands downward along the ray of light. Sila! The sword descended with overwhelming might. Pooh! Lu Chong's face turned crimson as the stitches made out of his soul energy creaked under the immense pressure of the sword, visibly reaching the limits of its durability swiftly. He was not weak by any means, but the formation that consisted of 16 9-star master teachers, including Ren Qingyuan, was simply something far beyond his league. At the same time, the sword was also attempting to forcefully drill a way through the poison barrier that Wei Ruyan had formed, causing her face to turn pale and sweat to flow profusely from her forehead. Teacher, we are already reaching our limits. Wei Ruyan exclaimed anxiously as she shot a swift glance toward Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian nodded. While his two direct disciples were defending against the attack from the formation, he had not been slacking around either. He had made use of the time that they had bought to examine the formation closely, and he had managed to find quite a number of flaws that he could exploit. However, those flaws were some distance away, and given his current circumstances, he was not able to reach them. I'll point a direction out to you too, and one of you will have to rush out to strike it hard. Once that's done, the formation will immediately be undone, Zhang Xian said. But halfway through his words, a resounding boom filled the air, as if something had broken, following which, the imposing Ren Qingyuan from a moment ago suddenly lost all of his momentum, causing him to nearly plummet from the sky. The abrupt dissipation of energy from his sword caused his Jinqi to go into turmoil, and he spurted a mouthful of blood out. Ren Qingyuan forcefully calmed down his jolted Jinqi, before turning around to bellow. What happened? Just a moment ago, the energy that the formation was supplying to him had suddenly halted. If not for his powerful cultivation, he could very well have died from the rebound. Reporting to Pavilion Master Ren, we aren't too sure either. A master teacher flew over and exclaimed with trembling lips. The master teacher pavilion that stands at the center of the formation suddenly ran away. Kuei Xing refers to Dubhe, the handle of the Big Dipper constellation, and at the same time, it's also known as the god of examination in Chinese mythology. The master teacher pavilion ran away? Ren Qingyuan's body jolted at that completely unexpected answer. Can you repeat that? The others also could not help but freeze upon hearing those words as well. How in the world could the master teacher pavilion run away? Not to mention, at such a crucial juncture. Even if the master teacher was pulling their legs, pulling like that was a bit much. I saw it with my own eyes. The master teacher pavilion ran at a very fast speed, heading toward a specific direction, as if it was obeying someone's orders. Seeing that the complete lack of trust from the surrounding crowd, the master teacher quickly explained himself anxiously. It even grew legs. If you don't believe me, take a look at it for yourself. As he spoke, he pointed into the distance. Everyone quickly turned around, and the first thing that they saw was a huge sandstorm that seemed to be heading their way. Upon closer examination, they realized the sandstorm was actually caused by countless buildings sprinting in their direction, as if cavalry charging toward an enemy on a battlefield. Even the earth began trembling in fear at their imposing charge. The heck? Is that a cluster of houses? Those buildings are actually charging right at us. What in the world is going on? Is this a building stampede? What the heck is a building stampede? I have only heard of beast stampedes before. All of the 9-star master teachers felt as if mini explosions had occurred in their minds, threatening to blast apart their rationality. Even Zhang Wuheng, Luo Qingxian, and the others were completely dumbfounded before that scene. They did not even realize that their beards were being blown up by their shocked gasps. They had seen alarmed beasts running amok, and they had seen schools of fish and flocks of birds escaping frenziedly from their predators. However, this was the first time that they had seen an army of buildings charging in a neat formation. At this point, they could not help but remember the old adage, as long as you live long enough, there is nothing that you will not see. Someone has enchanted those buildings. Ren Qingyuan was the first one to realize what was going, and he immediately bellowed out to inform the others. Of course, there was no way non-living things like buildings could possibly stand up and run of their own accord. The very fact that they could prance around and even make catcalls at them like street ruffians meant that someone had enchanted them to life. No, wait a moment. Those buildings over there, aren't those our master teacher pavilions? Now that you mention it, that is indeed the case. The swirling dust around her did not diminish her disposition in the least. On the contrary, the sharp contrast made her seem as if she was the valiant goddess of war descending upon a battlefield. Is she the newly appointed guild leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild, Wang Ying? That's definitely her. I've met her before. She might be young, but her talent in spirit enchantment is definitely peerless in this world. It took her only a few months in order to raise her mastery in spirit enchantment to a level where she could clear even the Spirit Awakener Tower. She mentioned that she came here to save her teacher. Does that mean that Zhang Xian is her teacher too? This. First, the head of the Poison Hall. Then, a soul oracle expert. And now, the new guild leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild. All of the master teachers could not help but shudder as they lowered their gazes to look at the young man sitting on the ground beneath. No words could describe the shock in their hearts. As 9-star master teachers, they knew very well just how difficult it was to groom a student to become an expert. Each of them had countless students all over the world, but hardly any of their students had succeeded in reaching the top echelon of the master teacher continent like them. This was apparent just by seeing how low the number of individuals who had reached a proficiency of 9-star in any occupation was. Yet the young man below, despite being only at St. 8 Dan Dimension Sundering Realm, actually had multiple powerhouses as his students. Just how in the world was this possible? More importantly, those students were willing to even defy the powerful and influential Master Teacher Pavilion in order to save him. Just how deep did their feelings for him run? While the prevalent culture on the Master Teacher continent prompted one to remain loyal to one's lineage, there were still plenty of cultivators who paid it no regard. Furthermore, given that Zhang Xian had been condemned by even the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters, no one would blame them for not coming to the rescue of their teacher. They could have simply feigned ignorance and steered clear of this mess. After all, the verdict of the Master Teacher Pavilion headquarters was absolute on the continent. But for their teacher, those people were willing to disregard all rules and risk the bright futures that they had ahead of them to dive right into this mess. If things went wrong, they could very well lose their lives. Just what in the world did Zhang Xian impart to them for them to be so loyal to him? Gritting his teeth tightly, Ren Qingyuan harumphed with an utterly cold voice. Guild Leader Wang, do you understand who you are going against at this very moment? I do, but I am heavily indebted to my teacher. Whoever dares lay a finger on my teacher, no matter who they are, I'll pit my life against them without any hesitation. The young lady replied calmly. So if I understand your words correctly, you are saying that Zhang Xian is your teacher. Is that right? Ren Qingyuan asked. Indeed. To be honest, he would not even have known that there would still be a living soul oracle in the world if Lu Chong had not appeared there. From the fact that he had never heard of the young man before alone, it showed that the young man had not done anything wrong that was worthy of the Master Teacher Pavilion's attention. Why aren't you speaking? After all the suffering that her teacher and juniors had gone through, Wang Ying was not intending to let Ren Qingyuan off just like that. With a cold sneer, she continued, the Master Teacher Pavilion has always prided itself on being just and impartial. Just when did it become so presumptuous as to state its own opinions as facts and pass judgment on others based on its own biases? You claimed that my teacher kidnapped the young court chief of the Glacier Plain Court. But let me ask you one question. Do you know whom the young court chief is? Whom the young court chief is? Ren Qingyuan frowned. She's a cultivator who possesses the rare pure Yin body. The Glacier Plain Court went to great lengths in order to find her. Seeing that Ren Qingyuan really did not know anything at all, Wang Ying did not have the patience to listen to him speak any longer. I don't know what lengths the Glacier Plain Court has gone in order to find her, but there's one thing I do know, and that is... Placing her hands behind her back, she said, she's my senior. Your senior? You mean to say that the young court chief of the Glacier Plain Court is Zhang Xian's student as well? Ren Qingyuan narrowed his eyes in shock. He quickly turned his gaze toward Yu Ruoxin and asked lividly, is this true? The Glacier Plain Court had not mentioned this when they reported the matter to them back then. Zhang Xian was indeed Zhao Ye's teacher for a period of time. But it's also a fact that he impersonated Yang Shi, took away our young court chief, and wreaked havoc in the Glacier Plain Court. Furthermore, the fact that he's the teacher of a poison master and soul oracle shows that he's a person of questionable character. Pavilion Master Ren, I ask of you not to be blinded by the words of despicable scoundrels. Yu Ruoxin quickly spoke up. Questionable character? Despicable scoundrels? How dare you use such words on my teacher and senior? Hula! Before Yu Ruoxin could finish speaking, a furious bellow suddenly echoed from afar, following which, a spear burst forth from the distance, and before she knew it, it was already right before her chest. Yu Ruoxin's face turned pale, and her eyes widened in absolute fright as she desperately retreated. As powerful as she was, she could tell that the might of that spear had already far surpassed her means to deal with. Even before the spear could reach her, she could already feel the force that it commanded threatening to pierce right through her heart. Hoo. While retreating, she anxiously formed over 100 hand seals in the blink of an eye. Following which, a transparent barrier reminiscent of crystal materialized right in front of her. The strongest defensive technique of the Glacier Plain Court, immaculate glacial wall. Kacha! The next instant, the flying spear collided head-on with the wall. But the wall did not even last for a breath before cracks began appearing throughout it. Yu Ruoxin could tell that the barrier that she had created would not be able to withstand the might of the spear. And once the spear penetrated her barrier, even if she survived the ordeal, she would be crippled for good. Thus, she turned to Ren Qingyuan and shrieked, "Pavilion Master Ren, save me!" Humph! Ren Qingyuan harumphed coldly, and as if he had teleported, he appeared instantaneously before the spear with a powerful leap. He immediately swung the sword in his hand toward the tip of the spear, intending to forcefully change its trajectory. Ding 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 ding. However, there was some kind of bizarre vibration to the spear that caused it to continuously strike down on his sword with incredible force, and every single tremor held such tremendous force that it felt as if entire mountains were ramming into his sword one after another. Dang 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 dang. Ren Qingyuan was forced to retreat several steps under the formidable might of the spear, but fortunately, he still succeeded in altering the spear's path. However, he was in no mood to celebrate at all. Shaking his numbed hand, he stared at the deflected spear with a look of disbelief on his face. That spear had come from a distance away, but even after piercing through Yu Ruoxin's immaculate glacial wall, it still wielded enough strength to force him back. Just how powerful was the man who threw the spear? His doubt did not last for too long. A young man flitted in from the distance, stopping right before the crowd. He stood with a perfectly upright figure in the air, emanating an aura of sharpness that seemed as if it could pierce the heavens. The young man raised his hand, and the spear that Ren Qingyuan had just deflected flew into his grasp. Following which, he turned his gaze toward Ren Qingyuan and said, "Pavilion Master Ren, I'll be taking my teacher back. I presume that you have no objections." Over the past few months, Zheng Yang had grown far more than he had expected, reaching a level that even he could hardly see through. "Teacher, I heard that the Master Teacher Pavilion has issued an arrest warrant on you due to the Zhang clan reporting that you have utilized an artifact of the otherworldly demonic tribe." Zheng Yang stood up and asked respectfully, "May I know if that's true?" After pondering for a moment, Zhang Xian nodded. That seems to be the case. To be honest, he was not too sure why the Master Teacher Pavilion had chosen to release an arrest warrant on him, but the cause should be tied to the incident that had happened back at the Zhang clan. Back then, he had been in a rush to save Xiaoya, so he had ended up borrowing vicious strength to deal with Zhang Wuheng. That could be the reason the Master Teacher Pavilion had ended up taking such a severe stance against him. After all, the Master Teacher Pavilion had always been wary of the otherworldly demonic tribe, and when the security of mankind was at stake, it was understandable that they would rather be safe than sorry. "Teacher, you have fought against the otherworldly demonic tribe and single-handedly destroyed an entire otherworldly demon emperor lineage. Yet due to an inkling of doubt that had to be verified, the Zhang clan insisted that you are guilty and demanded your punishment. Years of holding on to their title, as the #1 sage clan sure has inflated their guts. They seem to think that they can do as they please without facing the consequences." Zheng Yang sneered coldly before clasping his fist and bowing grandly to Zhang Xian. "Teacher, please allow me to vent your anger for you. You want to help me get back at them?" Knowing Zheng Yang's hot temper, Zhang Xian sighed deeply before nodding. "Don't take anyone's life. It will do just to teach them a lesson." "I understand, teacher." Nodding, Zheng Yang slammed the spear in his hand onto the ground, causing the ground to tremor. He turned his gaze upward and scanned the crowd above before saying, Ruyan and Lu Chong, the Zhang clan, the sanctum of sages, and the Glacier Plain Court have framed our teacher and attempted to take our teacher's life. Are you willing to help me exact vengeance for our teacher and bring honor and dignity back to his name? Of course, Wei Ruyan took a step forward. It's my responsibility to do so, Lu Chong replied as he walked forward too. Good. Zheng Yang replied heartily. He directed a cold and severe glare toward an old man amid the crowd above and bellowed. Zhang Wuheng, not only have you injured my teacher, you even issued an order to have him surrounded and killed. For the humiliation that you have caused to my teacher, I, Zheng Yang, shall challenge you to a duel in the stead of my teacher. Do you dare accept my duel? Hula! Zheng Yang flicked his spear to the side, and spatial ripples appeared along the movement of his spear. You are challenging me to a fight? Not expecting a young lad who was not even in his 20s, yet to dare challenge him to a duel. Zhang Wuheng sneered in disdain. Very well, come. Boom. Before Zhang Wuheng could finish his sentence, a piercing shrill like a sharp blast of wind suddenly echoed from above. He quickly raised his head, only to see a massive figure falling from the sky, heading right in his direction. Kacha! Before he could even react, a massive bottom had already slammed him down all the way into the ground, causing several of his ribs to fracture. A huge number of his teeth scattered all over the ground as he coughed mouthful after mouthful of blood. Seniors and juniors, how can you leave me out for a gathering like this? It seems like I have arrived late to the party, the owner of the massive bottom said with a bright smile, revealing his gleaming white teeth. Seeing the familiar face on the figure sitting on top of Zhang Wuheng, Zheng Yang replied with a heart chuckle. You came at the perfect time. With his eye of discernment, he could tell that Yuan Tao was far from a match for Zhang Wuheng. However, it seemed like while the rest of them had been protecting their teacher from the master teachers, this junior of his had not been slacking. The latter had flown to the highest altitude possible given the limits of his strength, likely tens of thousands of meters up in the sky, and he had dived all the way down from that height toward them. By the time Yuan Tao reached them, the speed of his fall had already reached several times the speed of sound. As the attack had come too quickly from an unexpected angle, not to mention that his attention had been captured by Zheng Yang, Zhang Wuheng had been caught off guard by the attack from above. This brief lapse in attention had been more than enough for the swiftly plummeting Yuan Tao to get him. The impact of the fall from someone who had been accelerating furiously for tens of thousands of meters was not one to be underestimated. While it was not enough to kill Zhang Wuheng, it had inflicted grievous injuries that would incapacitate him in the short run. Who could have thought that the first elder of the Zhang clan, one of the top experts in the world, would actually end up being incapacitated by someone's bottom before he could even use his bloodline ability? This would really be a huge smirch on his reputation. That's a relief. Yuan Tao patted his bottom before getting to his feet. Then, as if suddenly realizing that someone was beneath his bottom, he turned around and exclaimed with an exaggeratedly shocked expression, Elder Wuheng, what are you doing under me? You, pooh. Seeing the innocent look on the fellow who had nearly crushed him to death, Zhang Wuheng spurted another mouthful of blood out of indignation. Elder Wuheng, our Yuan clan has always been on close terms with Zhang clan, and we have never crossed one another before. Why would you appear beneath my ass of all places? Do you know how many days it has been since I last washed my ass? Furthermore, I went to the toilet before this, and I couldn't find any toilet paper. How embarrassing it is. Quick, come out, come out. I'll heal you up right now. With an anxious look on his face, Yuan Tao stretched his hand forward to grab Zhang Wuheng's head, and as if pulling a radish out from the earth, he plucked the latter out from the hole that he was in. Pooh. Feeling as if his neck was on the verge of snapping apart, the first elder spurted another mouthful of blood. The sheer embarrassment from the situation made his eyes red in anger, and he was on the verge of erupting at any moment. He was the most authoritative individual in the Zhang clan other than the clan head. How could he tolerate being humiliated by such a brat so much younger than him? In a state of rage, Zhang Wuheng was just about to drive his Jinqi to teach the brat a lesson, when the latter suddenly turned to Zhang Xian and said, "Teacher, it seems like the first elder's injuries are really quite severe. I remember that you have a pummeling healing therapy technique. Can I ask you to impart it to me so that I can treat him, so as to make up for my previous mistakes?" Pummeling healing therapy technique? Hearing those words, Zhang Wuheng nearly choked on his saliva. Just that bottom landing on him had nearly knocked him out of shape. If the other party pummeled him on top of that. Is this how you treat an elder from a clan that is close with your Yuan clan? Junior Yuan Tao, your memory is really failing you. That skill is called beast taming pummeling technique, not pummeling healing therapy technique. No matter how formidable a saint beast it was, as long as our teacher gave it a good beating, it would submit to him obediently. Zheng Yang kindly reminded by the side. "Ah yes, you're right. It's beast taming pummeling technique. How did I remember it wrongly? My apologies. I guess it might be because he doesn't look too humane to me. But back to the topic at hand. I came out in such a hurry that I forgot to bring any recovery medicine with me." Yuan Tao turned his sight to the young lady not too far away and asked, "Junior Rian, do you have any good ointment or the sort that you could lend me? You poison masters often concoct all sort of stuff, so you should have quite a few with you, right?" "I do have quite a few incredible pills with me. Within 10 breaths after consumption, the patient will be permanently relieved from all pain and suffering." Wei Rian replied with a sweet smile as she passed a jade bottle over. "You really are my savior, Junior Rian. I can tell that it's an incredible medicine, with just a glance. Elder Wuheng, I really didn't do it purposely earlier." Elder Wuheng? Don't run away, I haven't treated you yet." After grabbing the jade bottle, Yuan Tao was intending to feed the pill to the first elder, when he found that the fellow whom he had just plucked out of the ground had already fled far away with a frenzied look on his face. If not for the fact that he was severely injured, he would have torn Yuan Tao apart right there and then. What a pity. You do know this is really good medicine, don't you? You sure don't know how to appreciate good stuff. Yuan Tao grumbled with a look of pity on his face. Shaking his head, he turned to Zheng Yang and asked, "Since I'm not late, whom shall I face?" "You can just sit by the side and enjoy the show. That woman is mine to deal with." With an imposing wave of her hand, Wei Rian directed a piercing gaze at the first elder of the Glacier Plain Court and said, "Elder Yu Ruoxin, you framed my teacher and incited the Master Teacher Pavilion to issue an arrest warrant on him. I'll officially challenge you to a duel right now. Since you have the guts to harm my teacher, I believe that you should have the gut to face me in a battle too, right?" Yu Ruoxin's face paled. She had already witnessed the young lady's prowess earlier, and her poison art was truly indomitable. Yu Ruoxin had confidence in her own strength, but she was not so arrogant as to think that she would be able to match someone who could poison even a 9-star master teacher to death with ease. "Why? Getting scared now?" Wei Rian scoffed in disdain before turning her sights to Zhan Shi. "What about you then?" Zhan Shi's lips twitched, but he did not dare reply to Wei Rian's provocation. He was only at St. Nine Dan primary stage, a long way off from matching up to Elder Chu and the others. If the young lady really made a move, he would probably be defeated in a heartbeat. "Very well, I won't take advantage of you all." Wei Rian flung her sleeves and declared majestically, "Your Glacier Plain Court and Sanctum of Sages can rally all of your experts together. I'll face them all at once." Unable to take the provocations anymore, Yu Ruoxin bellowed, "Hall Master Wei, don't go too far." "Are you saying that I'm going too far? When you brought so many people to encircle my teacher, did you ever think that you were going too far? Whether you like it or not, none of you will be getting away from here unscathed." Wei Rian harumphed coldly as she dashed right for Yu Ruoxin. Before she even arrived, her poison aura had already scattered into the surroundings in the form of a pink mist. "Don't think that I'll be scared of you. Your poison art might be formidable, but I won't allow you to humiliate me that easily." Knowing that there was no way out of this, Yu Ruoxin bellowed furiously as she thrust a finger forth. The surrounding temperature suddenly plunged along with her movement, and it almost felt as if everything within a radius of tens of li would be frozen. She knew that Wei Rian would be a powerful adversary, so she had no intention of holding back at all. She drove her pure yin energy to its very limits and released it all at once. Seems like you can at least put up a fight. Wei Rian scoffed. Without paying any heed to the chilling energy that Yu Ruoxin was emanating, she continued dashing forward. When she was only 200 meters away from the ladder, she suddenly raised her hand and clenched it. Boom! A light yellow shockwave burst forth, and when Yu Ruoxin's chilling energy came into contact with it, it was first forcefully pushed back before abruptly sinking into the ground, as if infused with lead. What a formidable poison art that is! The surrounding crowd felt a numbing sensation on their scalps. To be able to render even one's Jinqi immobile, the reputation of the innate poison body truly was not unfounded. These children have really grown up. Zhang Xian nodded with a heartened smile. The previous time that his students had helped him exact vengeance was back, when they were still in the Tianxian kingdom. It had taken every single one of them to collaborate with one another, before they had been able to defeat Lu Sun then. But now, they had all grown into powerhouses that could fight toe-to-toe with even the Master-Teacher Pavilion headquarters. The rate that they had changed had left him feeling a mixture of happiness and nostalgia. At least, it seems like the effort that I have devoted toward them wasn't wasted, Zhang Xian remarked. As a teacher, there was probably no happier occasion than seeing one student maturing. In that moment, it would feel as if all of the hard work that one had put in was worthwhile. All of a sudden, Zhang Xian's eyebrows shot up. He flicked his wrist, and a seal appeared in the middle of his palm. At this moment, the seal was trembling excitedly, such that it felt searing to Zhang Xian. Zhang Xian frowned doubtfully. It didn't take in my blood, and I have unable to delve my consciousness into it either. Why would it suddenly grow so hot? Previously, he had been thinking of all sorts of ways in order to tame the seal, but no matter what he did, there was no response at all. Why would it suddenly grow so hot after being placed inside his storage ring? It was the greatest treasure of the Master-Teacher Pavilion, and it had been snatched away by Lu Chong, so that Ren Qingyuan could not use it to deal with him. No matter how the matter was resolved, he would likely have to return it in the end. If the Master-Teacher seal was ruined in his hands, it might really result in a full-blown war with the Master-Teacher Pavilion. While it might seem that his direct disciples had managed to one-up the Master-Teacher Pavilion, the unfortunate truth was that they still came nowhere close to matching it. For countless years, the Master-Teacher Pavilion had been the de facto leader of the entire Master-Teacher continent, and given its accumulation and influence, the couple of them there would still be far from sufficient to oppose it. Since placing it in my storage ring, it has been completely silent. It was only when I was thinking of my students' growth that it suddenly grew warm. Zhang Xian pondered for a moment before a thought came to his mind. Could it be that the Pavilion Master Seal is not tamed through blood, but through the virtues of a teacher? If that's the case, it should be easier for me to tame it if I use the Celestial Master Teacher aura, right? The Celestial Master Teacher was an individual who was recognized by the heavens, such that even Yang Shi dared not pull his weight before one. If the token was really related to the virtues of a teacher, who would be more qualified than a teacher recognized by even the heavens? Let me give it a try. With this thought in mind, he discreetly drove his Celestial Master Teacher aura and infused it into the token. Due to the increment of his soul depth, he commanded a greater control over his aura compared to before. Through careful manipulation, he was able to limit the emanation of his Celestial Master Teacher aura to the area in contact with the Pavilion Master Seal, thus making it nigh impossible for any 9-star Master Teacher, or even Yang Shi to detect it. TZZZ. As soon as the aura came into contact with the Pavilion Master Seal, the latter immediately became even hotter. There was an abrupt burst of wind, and Zhang Xian suddenly felt the weight in his hand disappearing entirely. He hurriedly lowered his gaze, and it was indeed the worst-case scenario. The Pavilion Master Seal had vanished without a trace, as if it had never been there in the first place. In an instant, goosebumps rose all over Zhang Xian's body, and his vision turned dark as he nearly fainted on the spot. He quickly released his spiritual perception and searched his surroundings, but it was completely empty. There was no sign of the token anywhere at all. It's over, Zhang Xian nearly burst into tears. The pavilion master seal was supposed to be some ancient sage artifact forged using Kong Shi's blood essence. And even Yang Shi would have trouble dealing with it, right? Yet, why would it suddenly disappear after he grasped it for a moment, as if an ice cube? Just by its name alone, Pavilion Master Seal. Even a fool could figure out its deep significance to the Master-Teacher Pavilion. Even when Lu Chong took it, while Ren Qingyuan did panic, he could tell that it was out of apprehension that the Master-Teacher Pavilion would be humiliated, rather than the worry of never getting it back. But now that the Pavilion Master Seal had disappeared into thin air, how was he supposed to give it back to the other party? While he did cause a huge fuss with the three powers, it was still something that could be resolved eventually. However, if he took away the Pavilion Master Seal as well, he would really be eaten alive. What the heck was this? Hurry up and come out. Stop messing around. Zhang Xian muttered anxiously as he searched his surroundings frantically. Soon his eyes fell on his palm and he froze. He found that 3 conspicuous crimson droplet imprints had unknowingly appeared on his palm, and it felt like they harnessed some kind of mysterious power. What is this? Zhang Xian pondered as he tapped on one of the crimson droplets lightly. Wang! All of a sudden, with a resounding buzz amid a slight moment of disorientation, Zhang Xian suddenly found himself being teleported into a void dimension. In this dimension, the concepts of time and space did not seem to exist. All that could be seen around him was a glaring white background and a smiling elder. Zhang Xian jolted in astonishment upon seeing the elder's face. There was no way he could not recognize the other party, when his sculpture could be found in every single master-teacher pavilion across the continent. Kong Shi. At that moment, Kong Shi had a gentle and warm look on his face. A hint of agitation could be seen in depths of his eyes as he said, "Finally, after so many years, pleased to meet you, the new celestial master teacher." Junior Zhang Xian pays respect to Kong Shi. Zhang Xian clasped his fist and greeted the elder before him. Kong Shi stroked his beard and nodded with a kind smile, acknowledging Zhang Xian's greeting. The Pavilion Master Seal is an artifact that I forged with 3 droplets of my blood essence after founding the Master Teacher Pavilion. Only a true celestial Master Teacher will be able to tame it. The fact that you can activate the seal and summon my will proves that you have met this condition. Kong Shi, pardon me for saying this, but would you allow me to speak first? There's something urgent that I have to ask you. Seeing that Kong Shi was about to jump into his usual long speech once more, Zhang Xian immediately interjected into his words and stopped him anxiously. From past experience, he had come to learn that despite Kong Shi's great achievements, he was actually a particularly unreliable person. Each and every time that he managed to speak to Kong Shi, the other party would vanish right before getting to the main point. If he allowed Kong Shi to go first this time, chances were that the same would happen. Having learned his lesson, Zhang Xian was determined to go first this time around. Oh, noting Zhang Xian's anxiety, Kong Shi looked at the young man for a moment before raising his hand. Please feel free to speak. I am afflicted with the innate fetal poison, and I heard that you underwent the same experience back then as well. May I know how you managed to resolve it? Zhang Xian asked anxiously. Innate fetal poison? Kong Shi frowned as he examined Zhang Xian intently. A moment later he nodded and said, It's indeed the innate fetal poison. The poison itself isn't too difficult to cure. But, the thing that is hidden inside the innate fetal poison might not be that easy to get rid of, Kong Shi said with a grim look on his face. The thing that is hidden inside the innate fetal poison? What's that? Zhang Xian asked in confusion. He had noticed the innate fetal poison early, and used his Heaven's Path Shinchi to have it suppressed in a corner, rendering it immobile. But from Kong Shi's tone, it seemed like there was more to the innate fetal poison than met the eye. There's no point talking about it now. You will come to know of it yourself, once you cure yourself of the innate fetal poison. It's not that I want to conceal this matter from you, but there could be adverse consequences if I tell you in advance, so I can only seek your understanding for that. For the time being, let me tell you the method to resolving the innate fetal poison first, Kong Shi said. Please enlighten me. Zhang Xian clasped his fist. While he still had some years before the triggering of the innate fetal poison, he still hoped to cure himself of it as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would be unable to shake off the tension coming from the feeling that he was already standing in death's jaws. The innate fetal poison is planted into the body of an expecting body in order to strip a fetus bloodline or to destroy its vitality. As the poison is planted during a fetus developmental phase, it's viewed to be an inherent condition by the body, so ordinary medicines are ineffective on it. There's only one way to resolve it for good, and that's to become a 9-star master teacher and undergo the tribulation of heavenly flames. Forget it. Zhang Xian glanced at the crimson droplets on his palm and murmured curiously. He mentioned something about touching it earlier. If I really touch it, what will happen? The artifacts that he created were indeed on a whole new level. No matter what kind of mystical effects an artifact could have, nothing was safer than raw power. With this trump card in his possession, his safety would be assured. With such strength at my disposal, the Zhang clan, the Glacier Plain Court, and the Sanctum of Sages won't pose a threat to me anymore. Zhang Xian thought with a soft chuckle. He had still been wondering how he should resolve the problem before him. But with such strength at his disposal, he had nothing to fear anymore. In the worst-case scenario, he would just have to force all of them to submit to him. However, I still need to resolve the problem with Zhaoya's meridians first. As excited as Zhang Xian was, he knew that his priority should be the tightly wrapped young lady before him. He continued to forge the pathways for Zhaoya's meridians, but in the midst of doing so, he realized that due to the rise in his strength, he was able to control his Jinqi more finely, allowing him to hasten the process significantly. Zhang Xian heaved a sigh of relief. It should have taken at least 2 more hours, but with this, I should be able to complete it within 10 minutes. While Zhang Xian was treating Zhaoya, the battle in the sky came to an end as well. Yu Ruoxin's face had turned completely black from poison, and her convulsing body plummeted to the ground. Be it in terms of poison art, or even just raw power, she was far from a match for Wei Ruyan. In fact, had it not been for Zhang Xian instructing his students not to kill anyone, she would have already been dead by now. Seeing that her junior Wei Ruyan had dealt with one of the culprits, Wang Ying turned to Zhan Shi and said, "If I recall correctly, Zhan Shi, you issued an instruction to have my teacher arrested and killed as well, right? I reckon that you wouldn't like it if my other juniors, such as Zheng Yang and Wei Ruyan, were to challenge you. So, you won't turn down a fight from a spirit awakener like me, right?" Zhan Shi's face twitched in fright upon hearing those words. Considering how Zheng Yang and Wei Ruyan were able to stand squarely against Ren Qingyuan, he would indeed stand no chance against those 2 monsters. However, the young lady in front of him was not a weakling either. She was the head of the Spirit Awakener Guild, and it would be foolish to underestimate the means that she had at her disposal. If you are unwilling to fight, there's another way out of this. Apologize to my teacher now, and retract your orders. Wang Ying harumphed coldly, with a fling of her sleeves. Apologize? That's impossible. Zhan Shi roared resolutely. Even if I die, I won't stand for anyone humiliating the Sanctum of Sages. I see. I'll fulfill your wish for a valiant death then. Seeing that the other party's mind was set, Wang Ying could not be bothered to waste her breath anymore. She raised her palm, and one of the master-teacher pavilions immediately charged toward Zhan Shi. Hula! A huge gale roared under the master-teacher pavilion's charge. The charge of something as colossal as an entire master-teacher pavilion was a rather imposing sight. Zhan Shi stood his ground and gathered his Jinqi to form an 8-meter-large palm print, and he thrust it right into the charging master-teacher pavilion. Kacha! The palm strike burst right through the master-teacher pavilion, causing it to collapse entirely. However, Zhan Shi was also forced to retreat under the impact as well. Stop it! That's our Empire Alliance Master-Teacher Pavilion. An 8-star Master-Teacher yelled in despair by the side. If you want to fight, do it somewhere else. Why do you have to use our buildings and property as collateral damage? He's sure, I can't care that much at this point. Zhan Shi replied helplessly as he leaped forward and dashed for Wang Ying. kill a cavalry by shooting down its horse, destroy a band of thieves by nabbing its leader. If the situation continued, it would only be a matter of time before he was worn down by the endless assault of buildings. In order to get out of this quandary, he would have to nab Wang Ying first. Do you really think that my strength only comes from my enchantments? Wang Ying scoffed as she looked at Zhang Shi's swiftly approaching figure. Unlike Zheng Yang and Wei Rian, she had not met with any fortuitous encounters, nor did she possess a unique constitution. But as the leader of the Spirit Awakener Guild, she had amassed the strength of her predecessors. No longer was she that naive and powerless girl of the past. She raised her hand and thrust her palm forward. Her movements were not fast, but they carried fearsome might. In the midst of his charge, Zhang Shi suddenly felt a shudder run down his spine. Knowing that he would not be able to withstand the attack head-on, he quickly leaped upward. But following his movement, he suddenly found his surroundings turning dark. Turning his gaze upward, he saw a massive puppet towering above him, and it was in the midst of swinging its fist toward him. It's the guardian artifact of the Spirit Awakener Guild, the Empyrean puppet. Ren Qingyuan bellowed in shock. Hula! Unfortunately, his warning came too late. There was no way that Zhang Shi could avoid the massive fist of the Empyrean puppet anymore. Once it struck him, even though he was a Saint Nine Dan primary stage expert, he would be inflicted with severe injuries that would leave him incapacitated for months on end. At that crucial moment, a sharp, cold glint flashed across the sky, deflecting the puppet's fist, accompanied by an imposing voice. Stop! That sword chi was powerful and magnificent, carrying a wholesome intent to it. Even though it had come from afar, it did not seem to be restricted by the concept of time. It seemed to have abruptly materialized right before the puppet's fist, thus saving Zhang Shi in the nick of time. That was a full-might attack from the Empyrean puppet, yet it had easily been deflected by the other party. An expert. Wang Ying narrowed her eyes warily. She hurriedly turned her gaze in the direction that the sword chi had originated from. At the same time, Zheng Yang also tightened his grasp on his spear, prepared to make a move at any moment. To be able to deflect Wang Ying's attack from such a long distance away, the person's strength was at least on par with Ren Qingyuan's. In fact, in the field of swordsmanship, that person might even have surpassed Ren Qingyuan. It's the speed sword quintessence. Zhang Xian, who was still in the midst of reconstructing Zhao Ye's meridians, suddenly spoke up at this point. With a nod, he answered the doubt that was in everyone's mind. It's probably the head of the Zhang clan, the father of the young prodigy, Sword Saint Xing. He had already learned the essence of the Zhang clan swordsmanship back in the Zhang clan, and he knew its capabilities very well. It was capable of allowing one's sword chi to break free from the restraints of time and reach one's opponents in an instant. However, the only one who could pull off such fine control of it, even from a long distance away, was the legendary head of the Zhang clan, Sword Saint Xing. I was intending to challenge him back when I was still at the Zhang clan, but he was nowhere to be seen. Since he's here, it's a good opportunity to see if he's really as strong as the others make him out to be. Zhang Xian thought with a smile. During his trip to the Zhang clan, he had managed to make an appointment to duel with Sword Saint Xing, but in the end, he did not get to meet the other party. Who could have thought that they would come by one another here? Since that was the case, he could use the other party as a sparring partner to try out his newfound strength while exacting vengeance for Elder Jian. More importantly, he would make it clear to the other party that if his son wanted to marry Luo Ruoxin, he would have to get past him first. Hula! Barely after those thoughts surfaced in his head, the space ahead of him suddenly rippled, and two figures came into appearance. A middle-aged man and a middle-aged lady. They were the couple who had been going around in search of their son, Sword Saint Xing and Sword Saint Meng. Those two had been going in the opposite direction from the Empire Alliance when they received Yang Shi's message and rushed over. Clan head. Upon seeing the two of them, Zhang Wuhing immediately rushed up to them in agitation, as if he was looking at his savior. First Elder, what happened to you? Sword Saint Xing's eyebrows twitched in astonishment. As the #1 clan on the Master Teacher continent, even the Master Teacher Pavilion, would have tread carefully around the Zhang clan. Yet, for its first elder to be pummeled to such a state, not sparing any heed for the Zhang clan's dignity at all, just who could the culprit be? It's all because of that darn Zhang Xian and his students. Zhang Wuheng spat as he pointed at the young lad below. Clan head, you must redress my grievances. Otherwise, what will others think of our Zhang clan? If we don't deal with this promptly, we'll become the laughingstock of the master-teacher continent. Zhang Xian. Upon hearing Zhang Wuheng's words, Sword Saint Meng immediately followed the first elder's finger, and soon after, a young man gazing in her direction appeared in her field of vision. In that instant, her body began shuddering uncontrollably. It must be him. Dear, I am certain about it. It must be him. Sword Saint Meng turned to her husband and exclaimed passionately through Jinshi telepathy. Even she had no idea why she was so certain that the young man before her was her son. She was aware that her claims were unfounded, but she had always trusted her intuition, and she could feel an inexplicable connection with the young man. Fearing that his wife might run amok, Sword Saint Xing hurriedly grabbed her hand and squeezed it. Calm down, dear. As long as he's our son, we'll surely be able to reunite with him today. He had no idea what was going on, but given the fact the first elder could still be pummeled to such a state despite the presence of so many 9-star master teachers, it would appear that Zhang Xian was no ordinary figure. It was one thing if the other party was really their son, but if he was not their son, and they still rushed over to acknowledge him, that would really make things awkward. In the first place, it was already a huge embarrassment for the Zhang clan to be forced to such a position. If they made a mistake at this point, the Zhang clan's reputation might really be lost for good. Seeing right through her husband's concerns, Sword Saint Meng bellowed telepathically with gritted teeth. Are you doubting my words? There's no way I would fail to recognize my own son. Even if he has matured, my blood still flows in his veins. I know what you are feeling. As much as he's your son, he's my son as well. You are anxious to reunite with him, but so am I. However, it's precisely at a time like this that we must remain calm and ensure nothing goes wrong. Isn't there a scarlet birthmark on our child's bottom? I'll find an excuse to ask about it later on, and as long as we can verify that, we'll reunite with him right away, all right? Sword Saint Xing appeased his wife. Even though their son was a Khanate saint, that did not change the fact that he had only been an infant when he left their side. Furthermore, the other party seemed to have a slightly different soul aura from their son, which made it more important to verify the matter. And the easiest and least intrusive method to do so was through his birthmark. All parts of a person's body could change over time, but one's birthmarks would never disappear. Very well. Knowing that there was some sense in what Sword Saint Xing was saying, Sword Saint Meng nodded and composed herself. Seeing how the couple had been mumbling between themselves intimately ever since arriving, Zhang Yang's eyebrows shot up, and he walked forward. Are you the head of the Zhang clan? You came at the perfect time. I haven't had a chance to make a move yet, so do you want to be my opponent? Fearing that Sword Saint Xing would not recognize the young man, Zhang Wuheng quickly reported telepathically. That young man is Zhang Xian's student, as well as the progeny of combat, Zheng Yang. So, you are the progeny of combat, Zheng Yang. I have long heard your name, but I didn't think that you would be Zhang Shi's student. Sword Saint Xing clasped his fist and greeted the young man. Don't bother wasting your breath on crap like that. You just have to say whether you wish to fight or not. Your Zhang clan has humiliated my teacher, but your first elder still refuses to apologize for his misdeeds. If you don't wish to have a duel with me, I'm willing to drop the matter at an apology from you as well. Zheng Yang looked at Sword Saint Xing haughtily as he raised his spear imposingly, causing the air to moan under the pressure of his movement. He knew that Sword Saint Xing was a formidable expert who had made his name ages ago, but as the progeny of combat, he had already resolved himself not to back down from any opponent. Courage and tenacity would be his strongest weapons. Since he had gone there to vent his teacher's anger, he would have to make sure to beat the three powers into submission, so that they would not dare utter another word. I'm fine with having a duel with you as well, but... Sword Saint Xing paused for a moment as a smile surfaced on his lips. I happen to have an appointment for a duel with your teacher. Since the both of us are here, I would rather settle that matter first before dealing with whatever you have for me. Do you think that any random person on the street is qualified to duel with my esteemed teacher? Zheng Yang harumphed. Of course, if you can get past me, there will be nothing I can say about you challenging my teacher. But if you can't, just know that I won't stop until you finally apologize. Your words do make sense. It's perfectly normal for a student to stand up on his teacher's behalf, and there's nothing I can say about it, Sword Saint Xing said. However, the perpetrator behind the grudge with the Zhang clan is your teacher, and only when he resolves it personally can others accept the outcome. As a student, don't you think that it might be too disrespectful of you to meddle in every single one of your teacher's affairs? If word spreads, people will think that the matter was resolved only because Zhang sure took in a good student, and that wouldn't look too good, right? Zheng Yang was put at a loss for words. His mind had been preoccupied with how he could vent his teacher's anger, so he had not thought too deeply about the possible implications for his teacher as a result of his actions. He hated to admit it, but Sword Saint Xing was right. Of course, there was no issue with the students stepping forward to protect their teacher, but if they went overboard, it would make the teacher appear incompetent instead. And incompetence was one word that no master teacher would ever want their name to be associated with. Teacher, realizing all of these, Zheng Yang turned to his teacher in seek of his opinion, only to see the latter chuckling softly. It's fine, I can handle this matter. It's true that I had an appointment for a duel with the head of the Zhang clan, and since he wishes to proceed with it, I'm more than willing to entertain him. Teacher, your current cultivation realm, Zheng Yang exclaimed anxiously. His teacher was only at Dimension Sundering Realm primary stage, whereas the fact that the head of the Zhang clan was able to execute a burst of sword qi to deflect Wang Ying's puppet from such a long distance away showed that his cultivation was surely above Saint Nine Dan. Considering the huge disparity in their cultivation, how were they supposed to fight with one another? Making use of the crimson droplets formed from the Pavilion Master Seal, Zhang Xian currently wielded strength far beyond his limits, but due to his high soul depth, the nature of the heavens pathgenqi, and the fact that he had not showcased it at all, not even Zheng Yang was aware of the massive change in his teacher's fighting prowess over the past few seconds. Knowing what Zheng Yang was worried about, Sword Saint Xing added with a smile, I can lower my cultivation to Zhang Shi's level, and it'll only be a simple duel of swordsmanship, so you can rest assured that I won't injure your teacher. If I lose, I'll apologize to you on behalf of the Zhang clan, and not pursue everything that happened before. However, if I win, I'll have to ask Zhang Shi to abide by the agreement that we made previously. When Zhang Xian challenged Sword Saint Xing to a duel back then, he had promised that he would join the Zhang clan as an elder if he lost the duel. Of course, I won't renege on my promise, Zhang Xian nodded. However, since it's a duel, I won't take advantage of you either. There's no need for you to suppress your cultivation. Just bring forth your strongest move against me. You want me to use my strongest move against you? Sword Saint Xing was taken aback. Given his cultivation realm, if he used his strongest move, even Pavilion Master Ren Qingyuan would have trouble dealing with it. Did the Dimension Sundering Realm primary stage young man really mean the words that he said? Has that fellow gone mad? Ren Qingyuan, Zhang Wuheng, and the others were perplexed by Zhang Xian's words as well. They had seen the young man's strength earlier, and other than his many means and powerful students, there was really nothing spectacular about him at all. To actually ask Sword Saint Xing to use his strongest move against him without suppressing his cultivation, that was as good as asking to be killed. That's right. Zhang Xian nodded. On top of that, I'll sit here and fight you with a single hand. If my body moves in the slightest or my other hand is utilized, I'll admit my defeat. Sword Saint Xing's face twitched uncontrollably upon hearing those words. He had two reasons for challenging Zhang Xian to a fight. Firstly, he wanted to check if the young man was his son. Secondly, he could better resolve the enmity between the young man and the Zhang clan through this manner. Appeasing the elders of the Zhang clan while carefully controlling his strength to ensure that the young man did not sustain any grievous wounds. It was one thing for the young man not to reciprocate his goodwill, but to utter such arrogant words on top of that. He sure is like you. Just as Sword Saint Xing was just about to explode from rage, he suddenly heard his wife's voice in his ears, and his body twitched in horror. Am I really that arrogant? You were even more arrogant than him when you were younger. Sword Saint Ming replied with a smile. This? Sword Saint Xing scratched his head before looking at Zhang Xian helplessly. All right then. Since that's your request, I'll do just that. After saying those words, he descended from the sky to the ground. But the moment that his foot came into contact with the ground, the telepathic voice of his wife echoed in his mind. If you so much harm a single strand of hair on my son, do not dream of getting into my bed in the future. Sword Saint Xing staggered upon hearing those words, and he nearly burst into tears. Just what have I done so wrong to warrant such a fate? Could the young man have expected this outcome when he proposed to face his attack with one hand while sitting on the ground? Teacher. In contrast to Sword Saint Xing's tearfulness, Zheng Yang, Wei Ruyan, and the others directed worried gazes at Zhang Xian. Each of them had a fortuitous encounter of their own that had allowed them to improve swiftly. However, their teacher had not been lucky enough to have such an encounter, so his cultivation had ended up lagging behind them at dimension-sundering realm primary stage. With his current strength, there was no way that he could stand a chance against the full-powered Sword Saint Xing. There was absolutely zero chance of victory at all. Don't worry. When has our teacher waged a war that he's unconfident of winning? Since our teacher has said such words, he definitely has a plan in mind. Yuan Tao said with a smile. I guess that's true. Zheng Yang pondered for a moment before nodding. Wei Ruyan had come under Zhang Xian's lineage a little late, so she was unaware of many of his past exploits. Nevertheless, she still had a rough grasp of the latter's temperament and character. If there was one thing that she was certain about, this teacher of hers would never take the short end of a stick. Those who dared challenge him would only end up tragically defeated. Wait a moment. Have any of you realized that our teacher's aura seemed to have changed? Wang Ying suddenly spoke up. I could still roughly gauge the depth of his strength earlier, but right now, no matter how I look at him, it's like staring into an endless ocean, unable to see the end of it no matter how one squints. Following which, he flicked his sword and pierced it right toward Zhang Xian. He had only used a tenth of his might, but he did not hold back on his sword intent at all. The moment that the sword stabbed forth, it transcended through space and appeared right in front of Zhang Xian's glabella the next moment. Not bad. I have to say that your swordsmanship is quite decent. Zhang Xian chuckled softly, as expected of the #1 expert of the Zhang clan swordsmanship. As soon as he made his move, it was immediately apparent that his swordsmanship had reached a much higher level than Zhang Su and the others. Without bothering to dodge, Zhang Xian remained seated on the spot. He continued to reconstruct Zhao Ye's meridians with his left hand, while raising his right hand and tapping the space in front of him. A burst of sword chi shot forth from his fingertip, and it transcended the limitations of space in an instant. Be it the initiation move, the intent, or the release of the technique, the sword art that Zhang Xian had just executed was completely identical to that of Sword Saint Xing. If the others were not aware of the hostile relationship between Zhang Xian and the Zhang clan, they would have thought that they were brothers from the same lineage, sparring with one another. However, even though it was the exact same move, Zhang Xian's attack managed to reach its target first despite its later release. From the looks of it, Sword Saint Xing's swordsmanship would be undone before it could push even the slightest centimeter further. Sword Saint Xing's body recoiled in astonishment at the unexpected turn in events as he gasped in disbelief. How is this possible? Sword Saint Xing's understanding of the Zhang clan's swordsmanship had already reached an inconceivable level. Every subtle movement that he made was in alignment with the essence of the speed sword quintessence. Yet the young man was still able to get to him faster despite releasing his sword art later. Not only so, the young man's strength had also far surpassed his. If he failed to dodge this move, the young man would swiftly nullify any strength that he commanded, such that his sword would not be able to deal any damage, even if it fell on the young man's body. Knowing that he was facing a true expert, Sword Saint Xing decisively gave up on the idea of going easy on the young man. He took a deep breath before sliding his feet half a step back, after which, his sword curved in a unique and bizarre trajectory, forcefully transforming a pierce into a hack. You are going to the extent of executing the dragon-slaying sword? Upon seeing the move that her husband had executed, Sword Saint Meng nearly exploded on the spot. If there was anyone in this world who knew Sword Saint Xing the best, it was indubitably her. The two of them had practiced the dragon-slaying sword for quite some time, before they had been able to achieve some level of accomplishment in the sword art. While it was not the strongest sword art that they had, the might that it commanded was mind-boggling. Even Ren Qingyuan would fluster in its face. To execute such a move against him barely after the battle had started. Didn't I tell you to go easy on him? Is that how you take my instructions? Sword Saint Meng gnashed her teeth furiously. If I allow you to even come close to my bed, I'll write my surname upside down from this day forth. You reacted faster than I thought. While Zhang Xian had managed to outdo the head of the Zhang clan at the first encounter, he had to admit that the other party was a pretty formidable opponent. The other party was actually able to instantaneously determine that his defense would arrive faster than his offense, and he decisively changed his assault and launched a counterattack. Chuckling softly, Zhang Xian raised his right hand once more and tapped his finger forward. It was the same move as before. However, this time, the target was not Sword Saint Xing's glabella, but his shoulder. Under normal circumstances, Sword Saint Xing's strike would have struck down on Zhang Xian's head first, due to the longer distance from Zhang Xian's finger to Sword Saint Xing's shoulder. However, from the trajectory of his hack, if Sword Saint Xing continued with his offense, his wrist would cross paths with Zhang Xian's burst of sword qi. With the sharpness of his sword qi, there was no doubt that Sword Saint Xing's wrist would be severed before his sword could manage to strike down on Zhang Xian's head. Sword Saint Xing's face twitched upon realizing this fact, and his face turned even more severe than before. He had thought that given the disparity in their cultivation, he should be able to defeat the young man easily. Who would have thought that even when he utilized his full strength, he would still be unable to outdo the young man? The young man might have been young, but his eyes seemed to see right through his sword arts and maneuvers. Each and every time, the young man was able to read his movements and seal his offense swiftly. Not only so, the worst thing was that the other party was still using the exact same move. That move was the most basic sword art of the Zhang clan swordsmanship, and it was known as the probing sword. Just as the name suggested, the purpose of this was to probe the other party's moves and gauge the depth of the other party's strength before launching a decisive counterattack at the critical moment. Yet, using such a basic move, the young man had actually managed to seal off his offense twice. Just how deep was his mastery in swordsmanship? I don't believe this. Sword Saint Xing knew that his wrist would be sliced right off if he forcefully pushed on with his current assault. So he took half a step back and flicked his sword once more. In an instant, innumerable cold glints flashed across Zhang Xian's eyes, reminiscent of the countless stars in the sky, and they darted right for Zhang Xian's eyes. Falling Sword of Starry Sky. This was a sword art that had taken him 3 years to create. It still was not his strongest move, but it was at least 2 times stronger than the dragon-slaying sword that he had executed previously. This move consisted of countless pierces from differing directions, which made it extremely difficult to deal with. On top of that, it also had a beguiling effect on one's mind and soul. The first time that he had executed it, even Sword Saint Meng had suffered a bit under its incredible prowess. Since his first 2 moves had been foiled, Sword Saint Xing had no intention of holding back anymore. As soon as the attack was executed, Zhang Xian felt as if he was standing amid countless stars. His surroundings seemed to have emptied out, and it felt as if he was standing in the midst of a void devoid of the concepts of time and space. In such a state, it was difficult for him to even perceive his directions clearly, let alone determine where the attacks were coming from. To make an analogy, It was similar to how a celestial body looked the exact same no matter how fast it was approaching one, making it hard to gauge its exact distance away from one using one's eyes. This was currently the kind of attack that Zhang Xian was facing. In the face of the sword art, he found himself unable to accurately perceive how far he was from the sword pierces, and that was something extremely dangerous in battle. Teacher. Zheng Yang grasped onto his spear tightly as cold sweat trickled down his body. Even he could not say for sure if he would be able to overcome that sword with his current strength. Would his teacher be in danger then? Before the many anxious gazes centered on him, Zhang Xian finally moved. No different from his previous movements, he executed another probing sword right toward Sword Saint Xingwala. The sword chi flew forth, but just when it was some distance from reaching its target, it suddenly seemed to have struck something, following which, all of the stars collapsed, and the phenomenon that the sword art had created vanished without a trace. Ding 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 ding. Sword Saint Xing felt his blood churning furiously as he retreated 8 steps, and his widened eyes stared intently at Zhang Xian in disbelief and shock. The probing sword was actually able to overcome my falling sword of starry sky. How is this possible? While this move was not the strongest sword art that he had cultivated, its might was still not to be underestimated. He could not accept the fact that his falling sword of starry sky could actually be overcome by such a simple technique. It was no different from a mortal battle technique overpowering a saint battle technique. Hee. Zhang Xian chuckled softly. With the voice of a wise elder, he said, "The sword is the extension of one's strength. As long as one is able to bring it to a certain point at a certain moment, it will be able to defeat any enemy. Sword arts are auxiliary maneuvers that serve to achieve that aim. The probing sword might be the simplest move in the Zhang clan's swordsmanship, but it's precisely due to its simplicity that it's flexible enough to be used in many unpredictable situations. In the hands of an expert, its strength can be truly fearsome. It's similar to a drunkard holding a sword, hacking around randomly. There might not be any order of any sort to it, but it's fearsome precisely because of its unpredictable nature. It's impossible to fathom the intention of the attacker, along with when and where the next attack will land. Of course, just the randomness and unpredictability of one's offense isn't enough. The reason why a cultivator is able to curb an armed drunkard easily is due to the lack of purpose in his offense. Only when one could grasp the enemy's intents and attack trajectory would one be able to launch attacks purposefully to curb the enemy's offense. I have to admit that your fallen sword of starry sky is formidable. It locks onto its target's mind, spirit, and psyche, making it difficult to escape from it. However, in order to lock onto the target's mind, spirit, and psyche, there must be some kind of intermediary to establish a connection. And that intermediary is the very opening in your move. My counterattack was simple, but it accurately struck the intermediary. Given so, it's inevitable that your sword art would collapse altogether. To make an analogy, this is similar to the concept of bringing down a fortress. It might seem impregnable on the surface, but as long as one strikes it at its crux, one can easily bring an entire fortress to the ground. Simplicity in one's swordsmanship might not necessarily be a bad thing. If utilized well in the right manner, it can achieve spectacular results. At this point, Zhang Xian turned to Sword Saint Xing and sighed deeply before saying, "Sword Saint Xing, it's not that I want to lecture you, but you are overly obsessed with the form and movement of your sword, to the extent that you've lost sight of what swordsmanship truly is." Sword Saint Xing's face reddened. As one of the strongest sword practitioners in the world, he had actually ended up being lectured by a young man who could very well be his child. His face immediately burned bright red from embarrassment. There's no need to be embarrassed by that. It's already very rare for someone of our age to be able to come up with such a sword art and sword intent. Zhang Xian consoled with a smile. If you are willing to learn, I can offer you some pointers in your swordsmanship, so that you can further your skills. Just the ability to pull off dimension-severing sword chi meant that the strength that Zhang Xian wielded was already comparable to the Grand Elders. And even as the deputy pavilion master, He had no right to deal with a master teacher of that caliber. It's no wonder he was able to groom so many formidable students. Ren Qingyuan swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he turned his gaze to Zhengyang and the others. However, he swiftly noticed something peculiar among the group of students. There was completely no sign of surprise on their faces, as if Zhang Xian's abrupt power growth was perfectly normal. It was almost as if they felt that it was only a given for Zhang Xian to be that powerful. Monsters. Those are really a bunch of monsters, Ren Qingyuan thought as his body shuddered in fear. Voila! Before everyone's shocked gaze, Zhang Xian's sword qi finally arrived before Sword Saint Xing. Sword Saint Xing did not seem to be intending to go down without a fight either. He flicked his sword, and with a silver streak of light, it flew right for Zhang Xian's throat. 3 swords of the Grim Reaper. Upon seeing that move, Sword Saint Meng widened her eyes in horror. The 3 swords of the Grim Reaper was the ultimate technique that she and Sword Saint Xing had cultivated for many years in order to serve as their ultimate trump card, only to free themselves from the direst of situations. So far, they had not been cornered to the point where they had to use it, but to think that its first use would actually be on their son. Sword Saint Meng immediately whipped out her sword and prepared to dash forward to save her son. However, at that moment, she saw a smile creeping onto the edges of the young man's lips, and he calmly opened his mouth to speak. Stop! Voila! Everything in the surroundings seemed to come to a halt along with his word. The incomparably sharp sword that Sword Saint Xing was dragging toward Zhang Xian's neck abruptly froze in midair, as if a fish frozen within a block of ice. Go! With another calm word, the sword qi gathered at Zhang Xian's fingertip shot outward, and the 3 swords of the Grim Reaper immediately unraveled. At the same time, Sword Saint Xing sustained a heavy blow, and he was forced to retreat several steps. Why you? Was that dimension-sealing diction? Sword Saint Xing widened his eyes in shock as his body trembled in fear. Only a demonic tunist who had refined their art to the level of an ancient sage should be able to wield the ability to seal space at their word. No one in the demonic tunist guild had achieved it in countless millenniums, yet Zhang Xian had actually managed to pull it off. How could that be possible? That isn't exactly dimension-sealing diction. It just happens that your state of mind is a little weak, so I'm able to easily influence you with my words and force you to stop driving your zhenqi, Zhang Xian said. He might have wielded powers invincible beneath ancient sage after taming the pavilion master seal, but it was still beyond his means to execute the demonic tunist's dimension-sealing diction. The reason he could get the other party to stop was through his impartation of heaven's will, augmented by his exceptionally high soul depth and heart of teacher, thus compelling Sword Saint Xing to follow his bidding without any questions asked. In truth, even if he did not use this move, given his current strength, he would still have been able to defeat Sword Saint Xing with ease. However, this was the method that would bring the most shock to the crowd, and knowing that there was a limit to the duration of the droplet of power, this was what he needed as well. Incredible! Incredible! Sword Saint Xing pondered for a moment before making sense of what had happened. His eyes glowed in agitation as he turned his gaze to the young man. The fury in his eyes had subsided, and replacing it was pride and delight instead. A huge commotion had occurred when his son was born, and that was more than enough to tell anyone of the extraordinary fate that had lain ahead of his son. However, several unfortunate events had occurred afterward, and he had thought that his son's talents would forever be buried in the dust, never to shine brightly. Who would have thought that when they met once more, his son would be stronger and more talented than he had expected? There's no need to test him out anymore. He's definitely my son. Only my son could wield such capabilities and means. This thought sent surges of exhilaration through Sword Saint Xing's veins, and he began laughing heartily. When he finally calmed down once more, he looked at Zhang Xian and said, "Since you were able to overcome even my strongest 3 swords of the Grim Reaper, I'll admit defeat." You're going to admit defeat? Zhang Xian was taken aback. Going by previous scripts, the opponent should have continued provoking him out of concern for their dignity and reputation, all the way till they were severely wounded and incapacitated. He did not think that Sword Saint Xing would give up so easily. This was a matter that concerned the entire Zhang clan. But Sword Saint Xing was still able to remain rational and not allow the weight of his responsibility to blind himself. This gave Zhang Xian a very favorable impression of him. I would only embarrass myself further at this point. Since that's the case, I might as well admit defeat. Sword Saint Xing laughed. As one of top sword practitioners on the master-teacher continent, his pride would not allow him to lose to others. However, if it was his own son, he would be more than delighted to do so. But clan head. By the side, Zhang Wuheng did not expect such an outcome, and a look of panic surfaced on his face. Sword Saint Xing's admittance of defeat meant that not only would the Zhang clan have to drop all charges against the young man, it would even have to apologize to him. As the #1 sage clan with a heritage that could be traced back many millenniums, it had never suffered such humiliation before. I know what you want to say, but my decision is the clan's decision. Nothing you say will change anything. Sword Saint Xing waved his hand to stop the first elder from speaking anymore. After which, he turned his sight back to Zhang Xian and hesitated for a moment before switching over to Jinqi telepathy. Zhang Shi, there's something that I would like to ask you. Sword Saint Xing, feel free to ask. If it's something I can speak of, I'll answer your doubts. Zhang Xian nodded. To be willing to take the initiative to admit defeat, and even shoot down Zhang Wuheng's words. Zhang Xian's impression of him was getting more and more favorable. It's like this. Sword Saint Xing stared at him with a slightly awkward and nervous look as he asked, "Is there a scarlet birthmark on your bottom?" Birthmark? On my bottom? Zhang Xian was taken aback. After transcending over to this world, he had washed his body innumerable times, and he had spent some time examining and learning his body before. Indeed, there was a scarlet birthmark on his bottom, but this should have been something that only he would know of. How would this middle-aged man before him know about it? Zhang Xian eyed the middle-aged man before him suspiciously. Could he possess some ability similar to the Library of Heaven's Path that would allow him to look at his opponent's body? But having a birthmark was not a flaw, so it would be impossible for the Library of Heaven's Path to detect it. Moreover, he possessed the discarnate constitution of divination, so if by any chance any seers tried to divine his body, they would not be able to find anything at all. Thinking again, it was not that rare for a person to have a birthmark on the bottom either, right? Zhang Xian could not help but look at Sword Saint Xing doubtfully, uncomprehending of the intention behind his question. Seeing the implicit admittance from Zhang Xian, Sword Saint Xing's heartbeat quickened, and with irrepressible agitation, he continued asking, "Is your birthday on the 10th day of the 9th month, Teacher Appreciation Day?" Birthday? Zhang Xian shook his head in response. "I am an orphan, so I'm afraid I don't really know when my birthday is." His previous self had been wandering in the world as far as he could remember. Nowhere in his recollections had his father, mother, or any clues to his birthday appeared. As such, the only thing that Zhang Xian knew was that he was 20-something this year. Anything other than that was really beyond his knowledge. I'll just be perfectly honest with you. Noticing the confusion on the young man's face deepening, Sword Saint Xing decided not to beat around the bush anymore, and got straight to the point. If I'm not mistaken, you are very likely to be my long-lost son. Your son? Zhang Xian was stunned for a moment before a miniature explosion happened in his head. By your son, are you referring to the young prodigy? Sword Saint Xing was not only the head of the Zhang clan, but also the father of the young prodigy. As far as he knew, Sword Saint Xing seemed to have only a single son, so the other party's words would mean that he was the young prodigy. Zhang Xian's mind was immediately plunged into chaos. For the past few months, he had been cursing the young prodigy for being engaged to Luo Ruoxin, and yet never being around for her. And if he could, he would have already pummeled him into the ground several times by now. Never had he thought that the young prodigy would actually be him. No, that's not right. I've checked for the presence of the Zhang clan bloodline in me as well, but it has been shown that there's no relationship between me and the Zhang clan. Zhang Xian swiftly raised his rebuttal. He had once wondered if he was from the Zhang clan as well, and for that, He had even borrowed Zhang Jiuxiao's blood essence to conduct a blood test. The result from that test showed that there was absolutely no relationship between him and the Zhang clan at all. Taking a step back, even if that blood test was inaccurate, he did enter the Zhang clan's blood reservoir at one point in time, but he did not feel the slightest resonance with it at all. All of the clues went to show that there was no relationship between him and the Zhang clan. So, how could Sword Saint Xing possibly be his father? The matter concerning your Zhang clan bloodline has serious implications, so I'll explain it to you when we are in a more private setting. However, if you still harbor any doubts regarding the matter, you can verify your blood with my wife. Even if you have lost your Zhang clan bloodline, your mother's blood should still flow through your veins. Sword Saint Xing said as he gestured for Sword Saint Meng to come over. Sword Saint Meng could tell that the two men had been communicating telepathically with one another, so she swiftly flew over with an agitated look on her face. Zhang Xian hesitated for a moment before asking, "How do we conduct the test?" Given Sword Saint Xing's strength and standing, there was no need for him to cook up such a lie. Furthermore, to point out that there was a scarlet birthmark on his bottom, while that might not be conclusive evidence, it might be good to check it. Whether it was real or not, at least there would be some closure for him and the Xingming Sword Saints. Otherwise, this matter would weigh on their minds. If by chance he really happened to be the missing young prodigy, there would no longer be anyone to stop him from marrying Luo Ruoxin. Everything would fall into place, and it would be a happy ending. Of course, it would be a little awkward for him to suddenly find himself with two parents, but perhaps because he had been an orphan in his previous life as well, he was not too put off by the notion of it. It would not be too difficult for him to accept the matter with time. Even if that was not the case, it would not make any difference to his plans anyway. After the other party apologized to him, he would have nothing to do with the Zhang clan anymore. The current him already wielded sufficient power and influence to stand against the Luo clan and the Zhang clan. If they were not willing to budge, he would just have to force them. This was one matter that he simply was not willing to relent on. "Give me a droplet of your blood," Sword Saint Meng told Zhang Xian telepathically. Zhang Xian tapped his finger forward, and a droplet of blood flew forth from his fingertip. Taking in a deep breath, Sword Saint Meng took out a jade token and carefully placed the blood droplet on it. After which, she made a small incision on her finger and squeezed out a droplet of blood on the jade token as well. Wang. As the two droplets of blood made contact with one another, they swiftly fused together. With a light buzzing sound, the jade token exuded a blinding crimson light. See this? Sword Saint Meng's eyes immediately reddened, and her body trembled from agitation. "Your name is Zhang Xian, right? My son, I have finally found you." Zhang Xian was still in a dumbfounded state. He turned his gaze toward the jade token to examine it closely. He recognized the artifact. It was a tool used to test one's bloodline. Those who had direct blood relations would not only have their blood droplets fusing together, the jade token would also emanate a blinding crimson light. In other words, he had direct blood relations with Sword Saint Meng. Could this mean that he was really the son of the Xingming Sword Saints? So he was the very same young prodigy whom he had hated with a passion. Could this be the will of heavens? Not only was Yang Shi, whom he had mentioned on a whim, a real person, even his fate with Luo Ruoxin was also predestined. Sword Saint Xing was also stunned by the results before he took in a deep breath and burst into hearty laughter. "Ha ha ha, we have finally found him." He had still been uncertain before this. After all, what were the odds of finding the son whom they had lost many years back amid the massive master-teacher continent? However, seeing the two droplets of blood fusing perfectly with one another, even this final sliver of doubt vanished from the bottom of his heart. After the two men were done fighting with one another, they had begun communicating telepathically with one another. Then all of a sudden, everyone had become agitated at once. Unable to take the suspense any longer, Ren Qingyuan hurriedly asked, "Sword Saint Xing, what's wrong?" "Pavilion Master Ren, our Zhang clan shall drop all enmity with Zhang Xian. We'll no longer pursue the previous matters. Also, I hope that the Master Teacher Pavilion will sell our Zhang clan a favor and retract the arrest warrant. Sword Saint Xing clasped his fist. You want us to retract the arrest warrant? This, Ren Qingyuan could hardly believe what he was hearing. Previously, it was the Zhang clan who had stirred the pot the most violently. Why would they suddenly drop the matter, and even request him to retract the arrest warrant? Once the Master-Teacher Pavilion issues an arrest warrant, it cannot be retracted easily, unless there are some kind of unique circumstances. What has happened? Ren Qingyuan asked once more. If the Master-Teacher Pavilion issued and retracted its arrest warrant lightly, that would be as good as undermining the authority of its words. Even if they wanted to retract it, they would have to find a valid reason to do so. It was not so cheap as to be retracted after the two of them fought a battle and decided to make peace. Zhang Xian is the missing young prodigy of my Zhang clan. We have just verified it with a blood test, so there's no mistake about it. Sword Saint Xing said. Our teacher is the young prodigy of the Zhang clan? Zheng Yang and the others stared at one another in shock. They had followed their teacher ever since their time in the Tianxian kingdom, and they were painfully aware just how poor their teacher was. He had slowly paved his way forward with his own strength, having no one to rely on at all. How in the world did he become one of the core members of the Zhang clan within such a short period of time? Not to mention the legendary figure who was born as a Khanate saint, the young prodigy. With an incredulous look on his face, Zhang Wuheng roared in disbelief. That's impossible. I tested his bloodline, and he definitely has no relationship with the Zhang clan at all. Zhang Wuheng, are you insinuating that I can't even recognize my own son? Sword Saint Xing harumphed coldly. As the first elder of the Zhang clan, you actually tried to assassinate and issued an arrest warrant on your own clan head. Return to the clan right now and await your punishment. Don't force me to make a move. Zhang Wuheng staggered weakly on the spot, and his face became ghastly pale. If Zhang Xian was truly the young prodigy, that would mean that he was the real clan head of the Zhang clan. Even as the first elder, the crime for attempting to kill the head of the Zhang clan was more than enough to put him to death multiple times. He's your son. Ren Qingyuan widened his eyes in disbelief as well. He had run a check on Zhang Xian's background before issuing the arrest warrant, and it was stated that the young man was an orphan from the Tianxian kingdom, having no background at all. Yet, in the blink of an eye, they were actually telling him that he was the head of the Zhang clan. If that was true, the Zhang clan was perfectly justified in requesting for the retracting of the arrest warrant. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.